we always think of aliens with our human brains and like what we have in front of us. Like, to me, it's more crazy to think that we're alone or that we haven't been contacted by extraterrestrials of some form that aren't more advanced than us, when we have a lot of evidence for it. We have ancient civilizations where we still have questions.
I got love for the game. Bring it back to the golden age when the fresh beats knocked down. Whatever happened to real hip hop? Love for the game.
I am really excited for this one because me and Clark, if you haven't already seen his previous episode where we talked about his story, business, everything, go back and watch that. He's got a really cool story, really motivational stuff from the last podcast. I was getting amped just editing it myself. But this one, we wanted to continue the conversation where we left off, because the last time he was here, which is only like 2 weeks ago, let's be honest, we ended wanting to talk about aliens, but we were already like an hour, 40 minutes in. So we were like, let's save it for the next one. Well, aren't you in for a treat? Because today is that next one. Welcome to the show, Clark Kegley.
Thanks, man. You're wearing the NASA shirt.
I had to put it on again. I actually wore it last time to remind myself to talk about this stuff with you, but then I didn't even do it. Yeah. And so now it looks like we're wearing the same shit. Are you wearing the same shirt too?
Well, dude, I was in the store, and I saw they had NASA shirts, and they were really sick. And I'm like, oh, it was after we talking about aliens. And I was like, okay, I got to see if there's matching shirts, same size, because you're probably like a large, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going to get these. And they only had extra small. So maybe I should have got them. That would have been more fun.
Yeah, I can imagine myself wearing an extra small on this show.
Yeah.
Fuck it. It's my show. They're not going to fire me.
That's right, man. Yeah. No, I'm stoked to talk and riff. We're not experts by any stretch of the imagination. I would consider us enthusiasts based on our conversation.
For sure.
Explorers, searchers. Researchers,
which is fun. I think that's some of the fun conversations, because if you're too deep into it and you know all the facts, it's almost not even fun to talk to that person.
Well, they research probably 20 hours a week on it. Like, we've met those people, or we've seen those people, like they're an encyclopedia in their head. They're talking about Roswell, they're talking about all these things, all these papers that have come out, and I'm just like, how do you function knowing all that? So I feel like I'm a comfortable level of awareness with what's real, what's not real, what's proven, what's not proven. And part of the fun about aliens and talking about stuff is the unproven stuff. So it's not like, I that's where it gets weird, man. Like, creating content around it, if you approach it with a lighthearted approach, like, hey, this shit's crazy. Like, none of us really know the facts because it's impossible to with all the cover-ups and secrecy around it. But like, what if, and I think people get scared away from asking the like, what if question because they're going to get ridiculed or whatever. So yeah. I don't know, man, fuck it. Like, it's a fun topic to talk about. Like, there's no bigger question than, are we alone?
Yeah. You know, what's funny is, like, I've gone through a lot of different phases. It's almost like I'm trying to deny that I'm deep in the rabbit hole on aliens and UFOs. And so I went through a phase where I was completely convinced this is real. And then I went through a phase where I was like, what is life? I could have sworn this shit was not real. I could have sworn it was a joke when I was growing up for the first 25 years of my life. Actually, 28 years of my life, And now I'm like, maybe this is just the shit that nobody's ever talked about growing up because they're too afraid to put it in the history books. And dude, I think that's a whole other topic on its own. Aside from the fact that it's just aliens and UFOs, anytime, like, for example, who's the guy who wrote Magicians of the Gods and Fingerprints of the Gods? Graham Hancock, right? Perfect example. He's not an alien, pro-alien, but he is pro, hey, we have all these ancient civilizations. Yeah. Göbekli Tepe, you name it. Is that the one that's
Pyramids.
on Mount Titicaca?
Oh, it's in Turkey.
Okay.
Göbekli Tepe.
Okay.
It's the sheep farmer discovered it.
Really?
Yeah, he was just out and about one day. I just watched I think it was Ancient Aliens episode on it. Yeah. He was just out and about, and then he started digging because he saw something peeking up, and then he discovered Göbekli Tepe, which is, I believe it's the most widely considered oldest monument that we have.
Right.
Ever. Well, and it's buried underground.
What's crazy about that is he's saying it's a 12,000-year-old civilization, and obviously it's signs of advanced technology, right? There's 3D carvings carved out of the stone, right? Meaning that it's like a 3D thing out.
Yeah.
They carved the rock around it with like lasers and shit.
Right.
12,000 years old, 10,000 years before the pyramids, or
Yeah.
6,000, something like that.
Allegedly when they were built. And that's the coolest thing about like Graham Hancock's work and stuff. And I've read like his books and watched all his podcasts and like have a journal filled with like notes. And I'm like, oh, this is the answers,
Yeah.
man. You know, it's really cool because he's so deep into it and presents things in such a way that's like logically you can accept it and make sense. And it dispels this whole like, there's a couple different branches with aliens. All right. Just to lay the lay of the land for people. Like there's the conspiracy group who thinks that we literally are covering up every single thing, like, you know, Tom DeLonge style. It's the end of the world. The Russians and us are working together. We're going to fight together. We have contact with ETs, all that stuff. Then I think there's like the other camp, which I would consider myself in, which is more like the ancient civilization camp. Like alien is kind of, okay, however you define alien, ET, like there's things that are like this microphone's alien, you know, it's a weird technology with Wi-Fi and recording everywhere in a cloud. Like that's pretty fucking alien, you know? So like to even define that's hard. But I love talking about like that ancient stuff like Gobekli Tepe, and that's why Graham stuff's really badass.
Well, even the stuff with Graham is like, he's not pro-alien, but he still gets shunned by scientists because think like anybody who's like super Christian, even though they're a scientist and they're studying things that directly contradict what the Bible say, but in their own head, they're able to believe contradicting thoughts, even though they think it's just because they think it's acceptable with like mainstream and religion and whatnot. And so my point is, people like him get shunned just because his viewpoint on his findings just don't match what people want it to be, which I think is the exact opposite of what science should be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, man. I was reading his stuff and he was talking about ancient Egypt. And that is one of my favorite rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah.
Right. Cause the ancient stuff, right? Like you date the pyramids and people are saying what, I don't know, between 8,000 and 6,000 years ago, something like that. They were built. And then you look at the Sphinx and it's older. And there's this whole conflict where religion gets brought in there because, you know, they don't want to admit that something's older than that because I believe the Quran or, you know, their texts that they go off, Egyptologists go off and hugely religious over there, only dates back to around 6,000 years or something. So to even say that something's older than that, and I could have the dates wrong or whatever, but they're saying that this is inaccurate in our holy text, which means it's not literal. And so they can't, by just believing that religion, they can't actually say, oh, this might be older. We can admit this evidence. And that's the whole like battle right there between Egyptologists who own the freaking thing, right? And they're doing the research, and independent people who are like, wait, there's water erosion. Last time there was water here, it was like 12,000 years ago. Like this doesn't match.
Yeah.
And that to me is really crazy and really cool to like dive into because, you know, sometimes the people closest to it, they might have a vested interest to uphold a certain belief.
Yeah. Do you feel like the kind of the ancient civilizations and stuff, Graham Hancock, do you feel like any of that is tied into the whole UFO conspiracy?
I mean, to bounce all over. I think like, so like I went to Egypt, right? And it's crazy over there, man. Like if you guys haven't been to Egypt, you know, plane ticket's like $1,000 round trip to get there. So it's, you know, it's that, but it's super cheap over there. Beer is the strongest I've ever had. They have like 10% beer, no regulations, like $1. You have to go buy it from this guy's, I thought I was buying like meth. All right. I just asked our driver, I'm like, hey, you know, there's beer around here. He's like, oh yeah. And he took us around this alleyway, and then there's this metal gate that they have to put up, and you have to go in this basement, and there's all this beer. I'm like, geez, I'll take that. And it's like 10%, just get blasted, whatever. But like when you're in Egypt, dude, and you're climbing on the pyramids, like you can actually go there, and there was no one there when we were there because everyone was so scared of it. And so you're touching the Great Pyramid, like really in your hands right there. You're feeling it. You can like climb up on the first or second or third one, no problem. Like it's insane how just open it is, you know? And like, yeah, it's just really powerful too. Cause like then the sad part is you go into like their museum where they have the mummies, right? And the mummies, perfectly preserved, eyelashes still intact. Everything you see online is exactly like that. And they say no flash photography, but then you have all these people like doing selfies and stuff. And I'm just sitting there like, man, like this pharaoh, built a whole fucking pyramid, wanted to be buried with his riches so he could be left the fuck alone.
Yeah.
And now he's just under some like fluorescent lights getting selfies taken with him.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. And then you walk outside and they don't have any money to fix up their museum. So you have these artifacts that are like thousands and thousands of years old with giant signs that say, please do not climb or touch the oxen or whatever the fuck it is, right? And people are like riding the bull and like taking selfies. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, there's like a water leak in the corner, like dripping on a tablet that's thousands of years old. I'm like, it gave me a lot of anxiety going there, but it was badass at the same time.
You know what gave me a lot of anxiety? Watching The Universe on Netflix last night, and they're talking about galaxies and how they're formed and how big they are and where we are in the universe.
Yeah.
Shit was blowing my mind, man.
Yeah.
Gave me anxiety. And ironically, I took an edible last night to fall asleep, and it kicked in about 2 hours later when I started watching this stuff.
Yeah.
And man, I wrote a couple of notes. One of them that I was telling Chris about off camera before you got here was this is high thoughts on edibles watching The Universe, bro. I realized, yo, if I ever get the opportunity to meet aliens or an alien, I'm gonna have so many fucking questions, right? You don't want to get to that moment and freeze and forget all the questions you've ever wondered.
Yeah.
So I was like, why don't I think smarter and not harder? And I created a note on my phone called Questions to Ask an Alien. So here are the questions I came up with last night at 2 a.m. when I was blasted on edibles. Questions to Ask an Alien. What are your thoughts on black holes? What is the purpose? Can they be used? What happens inside of the black hole? Can they be controlled with any technology? What are other civilizations in our own galaxy like? What about other galaxies? How big is the universe? Are we able to meet all the different civilizations in the universe and study them? Is there a governing civilization for space in the universe as a whole? Like, does someone police everything? What about technology to visit other universes? Does that exist? Is there a God? What are your beliefs on God or religion? What is dark matter? Can you go back in time? Can you change the past? What is the oldest civilization in the universe that's still around, or just the oldest period? Is the Big Bang real? And why does life exist? Does life in the universe have a purpose, and what is it? Big, deep questions for aliens, bro. I'm prepared.
You'd have to communicate in mathematics.
Or telepathically. What if they just like telepathically lasered all the answers to all those questions in an instant into my head, and my head just explodes?
Yeah, that'd be nutty.
It'd be like the scene from Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh yeah,
where they were on Mars without their helmet on.
Yeah,
and their head just starts exploding.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like with the aliens and stuff. Like, I feel like the deeper you go down the rabbit hole, the more you realize a lot of the religious texts too.
Yeah.
They talk about angels and people coming down and seeing us and whatnot, and it just can all be explained with extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
But it can all be explained with like some sort of influence, and maybe this is what I've been thinking about a lot. Maybe some of that stuff that seems a little sci-fi in religious texts, right, are just got lost in translation, right? Like the actual name for angel, it comes from Greek. I forget the Greek one, and it just means the messenger, you know, and that. Angels with wings. I was listening to Gorgio Sucralose, right? I think that's how you pronounce it.
Ancient Aliens.
Yeah, the meme guy. He was talking about it. That like the wings on aliens are our own depiction. Like that's pretty recent in the grand scheme of things. Like up until, I don't know, 1,000 years ago or whatever, like that whole fantasy with like a white beard God watching over and like angels with wings and stuff, that wasn't how they actually depicted them. So if you take away the wings and they're just things that come and visit and they're messengers, it starts like all the pieces start clicking together a little more. And I'm not saying that's the answer, but it's much more believable. And you're like, oh, okay. Cause like, remember when you were a kid and did you ever play that game Telephone in class?
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. And for those of you who didn't have a childhood, it's where like someone whispers something in your ear, like, bah, 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 and you're supposed to pass it around the whole class. And then by the time it gets to you and you say it at the end, if you're the last person, it's always a fart joke or something because you can change it.
Can we talk about that game real quick?
Yeah.
Because every day of my life that I've ever thought about that game, even as in my childhood when I would play it, I felt like we could really keep the message the same if we wanted. The only reason it never stays the same is because one motherfucker intentionally changes it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was probably that kid.
I was definitely that kid.
Yeah, no, I think everyone watching was that kid.
Yeah.
But like, okay, so the message goes around and it gets fucked up by the end and it's not the actual message. I feel like that's what language does. That's what writing does. That's what time does, right? So we pass around these oral traditions and then we have writing. Okay, then that's another person it's passing to, right? And then you have language that's getting translated from Greek or Aramaic or Aramaic. Aramaic, thank you. I can't pronounce that. And it gets translated along the way. And then by the time you get it in English, it's like, maybe that's not the actual message of what they meant. And the wings on the angels are a perfect description.
Yeah. You know what's crazy about, so I have a couple questions, but while we're on that, because you're talking about, it's literally like they added the wings to make sense of it, right?
Yeah.
What's funny is if you look back at all the ever pictures, whether it's a drawing or like someone's photograph of UFOs starting from the 1800s, right? Because back in the 1800s, people were seeing things flying in the sky before airplanes were a thing. And all the pictures that they drew of it, they look like big water ships in the sky with wings.
Yeah, interesting.
Right? But then you go to the 40s or 50s, now they're metallic. You go to even further, and now they're like these complex things. And it's almost like our interpretation of what we think we're seeing always lines up with whatever the technology seems to be around that time period.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know it's the question is like, do we know about it and is it being covered up? That's the other camp, right? It's like you keep talking about ancient civilization stuff. I could geek out all day on it. But we were just talking about that article that got passed around, right? Like apparently Tom DeLonge's full blown into it and he's in the know or something.
Yeah.
He knows information that we don't. I don't
I guess
how that came about. I don't know.
This is a juicy topic. But before we get into it, I'm curious, what was the first moment that like, was there a moment or a thing that you saw or heard where you're like, I got to look into this? Like, what was the starting point for you going down the rabbit hole?
With aliens?
Yeah.
And ancient civilizations?
Or UFOs in general?
Probably Graham Hancock and all that. I was raised really religious. We'd have to go to Sunday school every time, and I just hated it, right?
Would you consider yourself religious today?
No.
It's interesting.
Spiritual, not religious. Right?
Because I was the same way. I was raised religious, and it was shoved down my throat along with all my friends. And I feel like I don't, like the people, me and my friends, my girlfriend, none of us are really that religious today. And I think it's because it was shoved down our throats as kids.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you make your kid play piano and go to lessons with some lady in her basement and like you have to practice for 20 minutes, you end up hating music.
Yeah.
That was me too. And like when I found drums on my own, fell in love with it, played 8 hours a day and my hands blistered because it was so fun, you know? So it's like, you kind of have to come to this stuff on your own. And maybe that's what people say with religion too. I think they do. But no, short answer today, no. But went to a Christian private school when I was in college, a Christian private college. I was always public school till then. But the university my dad worked at, so I got a good discount and whatnot. Anyway, talking about the first experience to it, I remember just being in my dorm room so bored of like learning how to like the minors and theology and all this stuff. And I'm just like, oh, I don't want to study this. And I would always gravitate towards like Egypt and like ancient Egypt stuff. So I would YouTube it. And then I found this channel who made these animated videos and they were explaining the whole civilization stuff. And I remember like seeing one of those videos on YouTube. It's like a 1 hour thing. I don't know if I'm easy to convince or what, but it was presented in such a way where I'm like, this makes way more sense than all this other stuff I've been kind of shoved down the throat. And that was kind of the first dip into the rabbit hole.
How long ago was that?
That was probably 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's
when you started going all in studying this kind of stuff.
I wouldn't say I'm like all in.
Yeah.
Like I don't just do it every day, all day, but I love the conversation around like, what if, you know, that's the main thing. And I think that's cool to like have a lighthearted approach with it and not have such a serious, like, government cover up, everything's evil, everything's out to get us. Because even if like, you know, this is off topic, but like conspiracies, I see people going down that, like my grandma or whatever, and she watches, you know, InfoWars all day, every day, right? Yeah. And it's like by the end of it, you're convinced of 50 different things. And it's like, okay, what's the solution to that? Just live in fear, buy storable foods, eat those all day. Like everything's poisonous. So like you got to live, you got to keep your head on straight. So I think having a lighthearted what if kind of curiosity approach, that's just my approach to the whole alien thing. Yeah. What about you?
For me, it was definitely when Joe Rogan interviewed Bob Lazar. Because I had seen the Bob Lazar documentaries like as a kid. But in my head, it was, I don't know. I might as well have been talking about the boogeyman. You know, it was just like a fun thing to watch when I was a kid. And I never really believed it. And I always truly believed if aliens were real, the spaceships would definitely be more reminiscent of like Independence Day spaceships, not flying saucers. I thought flying saucers was like out of the Jetsons.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so when I kind of rewatched Bob Lazar's story now as a late 20s, about to go on 30 guy, I kind of, it inspired me to look deeper into it. So after a couple quick Google searches into it, Area 51, you know, all that kind of stuff. Ironically, Area 51 was the first thing I looked up on Google Earth when Google Earth first came out in like the early 2000s. I was like, what should I look at? Area 51.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, it was always kind of like I thought it was like a myth, like Bigfoot, you know?
Yeah.
And then when I looked into it and I saw actual pictures in documents, official government documents on CIA.gov. And when I send the link to my mom, the CIA.gov, the link where they show this document that's just released through the Freedom of Information Act on their website, and it has all the pictures that are of like UFOs, flying saucers just hovering there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if this wasn't real, why is it in official CIA government documents? And then I started reading books called like Above Top Secret. And then I started watching every documentary I could find. And that's how I kind of went deep down the rabbit hole, more because like it starts with me wanting to know like the answer to like, okay, where do they come from?
Yeah.
Right. But then I'm trying to look for that answer and I'm hearing all this other shit. And now I'm just like, I want to know the full story now, you know? And so, dude, why don't we just kind of start at where the story begins, where like Roswell kind of stuff, and then kind of take it from there on like what your theories that you've heard about and kind of what you think the story of the timeline up till now happened. Because it's a really crazy story, but I feel like what's crazier is that all these independently made documentaries and videos are pointing to the same conclusions about same moments in time. And obviously they differ in some points, but what fascinates me is the similarities that they do have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I wish we had computers to pull it up and stuff because there's like good evidence and whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to talk about things without the dates in front of you, without sounding like some hippie smoking crack and like aliens. You know,
all I'm
What's
saying
up
is
with
if you doubt the dates or if we forget a date, literally just go and look into this shit and you'll see what we're talking about.
Yeah, Bob Lazar was interesting. His stuff was presented in a really a way that was like, well, I don't know. I'd probably go 80-20 on it. Like 80% I believe him, 20% I'm like, I don't know. Because like he doesn't really have a motivation to lie.
Yeah.
To me, that's the most convincing thing.
Right.
Is like, why would you lie about any of that?
Yeah.
You know?
When I saw that that interview, I pride myself on being good at reading people. You know, I played poker from like middle school all the way through high school and even into college a little bit. It was a big fad back then.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I started learning how to read people, but also like I'm a dating coach and just me approaching a lot of women, you just get good at reading people and how they're feeling in the moment. And I could not see a single sense of him lying, which tells me one thing. He's at least convinced of the things that he's saying. Yeah. Or he's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Right?
Or psychopath. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's crazy. I think like the articles that like Tom has been bringing up and stuff, right? That you sent me.
Yeah.
Was that in his book?
So Tom DeLonge, the lead singer guitarist, started Blink-182. They stopped and then they started Angels and Airwaves, which is like the spinoff of Blink-182.
Yeah.
Same people. And I don't even think they're touring anymore or making music anymore. But he stopped to start a company called To the Stars Academy. And at To the Stars Academy, it started with him kind of getting on the inside track with some high-level government officials. And this is actually how the videos from the Navy got released, was through To the Stars Academy and the people he's working with. And so I'm talking about like the gimbal video and like the video with Commander David Fravor, the guy who was flying the ship and he saw the white Tic Tac video, right? So those videos were released through the To the Stars Academy, which is Tom DeLonge's company. And he started that and got in with these people because he wrote a book called Secret Machines, which is a fiction book. And it's a series of books now. It's a story, but it's him using story and fiction to tell the real facts about what's really happening in the government. And he came to these conclusions through lots of interviews, lots of personal research, the way you and I are kind of just enthusiasts of it.
Yeah.
And then he kind of just, the way he describes it is he kind of eventually realized through looking into it so much what was really going on. And so just hearing a little bit of what he's talked about on interviews and watching those and then reading, I've read part of Secret Machines, which is a really good book. You should actually read it. It's like great storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, our mutual friend J-Max, he said he read it a long time ago, or at least an excerpt, and it was bad. So I think I must have gotten the version that he eventually hired an editor to edit it, because it's great storytelling.
Yeah.
The way he writes it and the way he keeps you going.
Why like Tom DeLonge, though? That's the thing. Like anytime someone goes public and they're like, oh, I have all this info that no one else has and it's from secret sources.
Yeah.
I always like, it sounds fishy, you know?
Yeah.
It's like they trusted me, but I'm like, what? Why would they trust you? You know, like I know you have this academy. That's the only thing. It's like,
well, he only started that after he got in with these guys. I
like
think,
how? Like what's like you knock on their door and say, hey, tell me your secrets. Like, no, they're classified.
I don't consider myself a huge enthusiast on Tom DeLonge, but this is just me telling you what he was saying on Joe Rogan's podcast, because Joe, I think, doesn't like Tom DeLonge in the sense that he doesn't believe half the shit he's saying. But also that just tells me
in that camp too.
Really?
Yeah.
It just tells me, I don't know. I feel like you got to be open to all of it, right? If you accept one thing that this guy's saying about Roswell to be true, then you kind of got to accept a lot of the other stuff he's saying too. You got to be open to it. And here's the thing: there's circumstantial evidence, but there's not hard evidence.
Yeah.
But if you listen to one person and you're open to his take on this, remember, it's just his take on circumstantial evidence. So in my opinion, at least me, I'm trying to be open to what everybody's saying so I can form my own opinion. And so with Tom DeLonge specifically, I think he wrote this book and he was going on a little kind of radio tour to launch the book. And what happened was, and this is again the story that he told on Joe's podcast, what happened was he was saying some stuff about the government's involvement in the UFO conspiracy, why they covered it up, and why it's actually a noble thing that they're covering it up, and some of his conclusions he's drawn. And apparently government officials heard about this, were like, how the fuck does he know this stuff? Because that's not out there, right? And then they started inviting him to talk to them, and he kind of just slowly worked his way into inner circles, got introduced to this person and then to this person. And then pretty soon he's got Luis Elizondo, who's one of the top people. He's the guy who was on CNN talking about the TikTok video, being the guy who's the head of that department in the Pentagon, right?
Yeah.
He's part of Two to the Stars Academy. So we know he's in with some high level government people, right? Now, here's the thing where I'm kind of getting fishy. If the government is really trying to cover this up, which we now know in 2020 that they are, because they officially came out with the Tic Tac video and the gimbal video, which are military videos taken on military craft in the Pentagon. They've released them, they've declassified them, and they've also outright said via Luis Elizondo and To the Stars Academy, hey, these are official Pentagon videos from the Navy. They exist. We don't know what they are, making them by nature unidentified aerial phenomenon. They now call it UAP. Instead of UFO. All right. So now they've admitted these are unidentified. We don't know what they are. We don't have access to this technology. We don't know of anybody on Earth who has this kind of technology, and they defy the laws of physics as we know them. And we presume, if we had to guess, they could be otherworldly, but they leave it open-ended like that. So this is a thing that's actually happened in 2020. So let's all admit that there's something in the skies, right? And let's also admit that they are covering up something. Here's where I'm kind of fishy. What is true that they're saying? What is disinformation? What is really going on here? And who actually knows the truth? Because all the stuff that Tom DeLonge is being fed could be bold-faced lies by the people in the government. You don't know. All the reports that Bob Lazar's quoting that he read while he's working on this technology could be bold-faced lies. And in my opinion, the stuff that I've looked into, I don't know why, but I've kind of turned a blind eye towards any of the abduction stories, because in my opinion, when someone claims they were abducted by aliens, what makes that person any less crazy than the person who's, high as shit saying he got abducted by aliens?
Well, that's the problem. That's nailing on the head too, that issue with abductions, because there's so many accounts of like crazy people claiming they got abducted, right? And so that's kind of like anyone can claim it because there's no proof. It's like, well, you just got to believe me. And it's like, even if there's like 100 people that are totally legit and it happened to, if people see that's a good way to get attention and featured and stuff and build a personal brand from being the abducted one, like naturally people would jump on that and be like, me too, me too. And so I don't know, man, but the abduction stuff, I was watching some documentaries on it and whatnot. Like, there's the theory that they're abducting us to manipulate our DNA. Right? And that there's a lot of DNA that they don't even know why it's there. And so maybe it's a benevolent thing, not a malevolent thing that they're doing to manipulate our DNA to diversify us more so than we could. Because I was listening to a guy in a podcast talking about it. And apparently, like, when a species gets too close to being inbred, right? Like, they can't exist. It's a bottleneck. So you hit it, like if your dog Tucker, you know, was just banging all his sisters and whatever, like they would eventually die out because there's not enough genetic diversity. And so we've reached that multiple times throughout a whole society. So that's one of the theories of why they would abduct people and manipulate the DNA as a benevolent way to keep us going, to keep us be like, hey, it needs to be diversified.
And I think that is the conclusion that people who are big on the alien conspiracy can connect it to Göbekli Tepe. And what's the other one that's on Mount Titicaca in South America? I only remember it because Mount Titicaca, like, could you come up with a better name? Like,
pretty good name.
Yeah. And so when you look into that stuff, you got to wonder, because here's the thing behind Graham Hancock's arguments. His only argument from his conclusions in his books and interviews is, I'm just saying that I believe we had advanced human civilizations around a lot sooner than we believed. And it also kind of changes our view of history because it shortens the gap between hunter-gatherer and advanced. And so if that is true...
Or it was a reset. That's the big thing.
Or it was a reset.
That's the biggest thing I subscribe to out of researching it all and like going down the rabbit hole and reading his books, is that there was a reset. We don't know when.
And when you say reset, you mean what?
Let's just say today an asteroid hit us, or we got an ice age and it wiped us out, or we blew it up. Like, what would be left of us? All our data's in the cloud. Like, this podcast in the cloud going on Wi-Fi that people are streaming it on. It's not like physically it exists somewhere.
You're going to love this. I made this note for the podcast today, and it's exactly that. Last night when I was blasted on edibles, all right, in addition to the questions to ask aliens. So I thought about this.
Through math.
Ancient civilizations. I was thinking specifically about Göbekli Tepe and Graham Hancock. And I had the realization while watching the universe on Netflix and they're talking about galaxies. I was like, yo, we send satellites into orbit. And we're at the point where we have so much space junk that it's like you almost wonder, is it even safe to go into orbit? Because you might get hit by some of the space junk we've thrown up there. But think about this. If there were civilizations 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, who were advanced enough to etch into big monolith stones, bury all this shit to hide it up in Göbekli Tepe, they think the whole structure was intentionally buried in that hill, which what you can see, which is mind-blowing, they think it's about 30 times bigger underground and was intentionally buried, right? If they had that type of technology, you would think to get there, they would have to go through a similar technological progression as us, to where even to learn about space and physics, we have to send satellites into orbit to even see some of the shit and draw conclusions from it. So where are the ancient satellites in orbit? That's the question.
Or ancient civilizations could have come down and given them information, like you see the Dogons, or I believe that's who drew it on the caves, right? And they're like, how'd you get this information? Like, the precession of the equinox, for instance, you would have had to study astrology for thousands or hundreds of years or whatever it is, right? Or like advanced calendars or all that stuff. And they always say like, oh, the sky people gave it to us. Right? And like they just point, there's like out there, they gave it to us. So it's like,
so maybe the lack of ancient satellites in orbit from humans is proof that maybe aliens did come down.
Maybe. I don't know. And then it's like, you know, maybe Earth's not the only planet that had life on it. You know, maybe it was Mars. Maybe it should be floating around there, but it got lost out and, you know, went into outer space, deep space or whatever.
You ever heard the theory that Saturn is a satellite?
No.
Or the moon is a satellite?
I've heard the moon one. The moon one was interesting. I watched another show on it where
Educate us.
Well, I'm not a moon landing fake guy by any means. I think we've actually been there. I think we planted the flag. I think we were in space. I think all that. I think the earth is round to catch people up. Right. But one thing they said, and I don't know if this is true, but they said when they landed on the moon, right, and you drop it, you can measure the vibration of the seismic vibration or whatever you call it of the moon. And if it was actually all the way through, if it had a core and it was like not hollow, it would have a much less vibration. But kind of like, if I take this and drop it on an aluminum can, it would vibrate like boom, because it's hollow and it's metallic and whatever. Well, it vibrated like that. It was weird. Yeah. So it didn't have a normal vibration, and people could be like, "Oh, well."
And it vibrated for hours from what I remember,
it was big.
They just kind of slammed the little lunar lander onto it.
Yeah.
And it just rang like a bell for hours.
Yeah, it was very significant. And so that's one of the theories where I was like, "Oh man, that's crazy." Again,
here's where that actually comes into that has to be real, because do you remember in the 90s it was a really big thing where we would all talk about the moon was made out of cheese?
Yeah.
It was because it was like Swiss cheese. We thought there were holes in the moon. Right. We thought it was hollow. Yeah. Why do we think it's hollow? Because of that.
And there's a dark side of the moon that you can't see. So who knows what's going on over there?
That's crazy about the moon. Like they say our moon is very unique in the sense that a couple of things. It's in the perfect orbit around Earth to where if the Earth didn't have the moon there in that exact spot, then Earth would actually lose its orbit around the sun over time, and we would get flung into space. Right. So the moon actually stabilizes Earth in orbit around the sun. So that's crazy. Second, it's placed in the exact position, distance from the Earth, using our gravitational calculations to where when the Earth, moon, and sun is aligned, it completely blocks out the sun. That would only happen in that perfectness if it was in that exact spot in orbit. Right. And theoretically, it could have been anywhere in orbit. Right. Yeah. So it just happened to be there. And then the third thing is it's also unique because no matter where you are on Earth, we all see the same face of the moon. The moon always rotates perfectly around the Earth to where it never shows us the opposite side of the moon. Like you said, the dark side of the moon.
It's crazy. That's nuts. Yeah, I mean, that is a theory that it could be a satellite. Yeah. And it sounds crazy when you hear it for the first time and without being presented a list of facts and all this stuff. But if people like do their own research and dive into it, you start realizing like a lot of these crazy theories, they don't actually, like there's actually some substance to it.
There's ancient Indian civilizations that are still around that even they're in Arizona, bro.
Huh.
Native
Americans.
Yeah, we're talking about ancient. I'm just throwing out words, but that's what I meant. Native Americans. There's Arizonan Indians that their whole history and religion, they talk about star people coming down and giving them technology. They also talk about the day that the moon appeared in the sky.
Wow.
So there's stories from before the moon was there. So if you're talking about the theory that the moon's a satellite.
Yeah. I saw this one video where it had this, you might know the name of it, this like black satellite looking thing that's rotating in our orbit. And it gets convoluted with all the space junk out there and stuff. You can't really tell what it is.
You're talking about the Black Knight satellite?
I think so. Okay. Yeah. And it's like a dead rogue satellite and it just floats around there. I think
Ancient
it's in like
satellites,
Antarctica. Bro. Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I was saying, bringing it up because you did. And it's just there. And there you can get little glimpses of it, but it moves really fast, right? So it's hard to really lock on and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's pictures of it. I don't know if it's bullshit or not.
Yeah.
But that's another thing where I'm like, oh, that's
I think a few of those pictures, because the first time I saw someone talk about it was on a documentary on Amazon Prime, I think.
Yeah. They have all the rogue stuff.
Yeah.
Them and
they
Gaia.
have the good stuff, bro.
They have no filters.
Yeah.
You can post anything on there.
Exactly, dude.
Yeah.
And this one was specifically showing like NASA footage, so public NASA footage.
Yeah.
And and one of those showed the Black Knight satellite.
That's crazy. See, this is the thing with NASA right there. Is like, okay, we went to the moon in the late 60s. It's been 60 years since then. What have we been doing? Like, it took us like since the space race happened, right? Because we found the Nazi technology and they were working on all this crazy stuff. And then we got into it with the Russians and we had this big dick measuring contest of who could go there faster.
Well, let's go there because the people listening don't even know about the Nazis' involvement in this.
They were working on some advanced stuff.
So World War II.
Yeah.
And so do you kind of know this story?
A little bit.
As they say it?
I mean, loosely. I know all this stuff loosely. Okay. Not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but the Operation Paperclip, if that's what you're referring to, where basically the war ends, right? We're fighting everyone. Okay, Germans lose. And then they have all these scientists who were some of the best scientists we've ever seen, like knew way more than we did.
Yeah.
And so then we got in this big pissing contest with Russia of like, well, you're going to the moon. And the theory was that we wanted to weaponize it, right? Or we wanted to launch nukes from space and have much more accurate stuff. Because if you launch them from the Earth, well, you can just knock them out and you have all these defense stuff. But if you launch it straight down and no one owns space, right, then it's much more effective and deadly. And so that's the real reason a lot of people say we wanted to go up there is military. Right. And so we got in this big match. We heard about all this stuff. So instead of having all these Nazi scientists be like, all right, you guys are all dead, we actually covered it up by importing them under the Operation Paperclip. And Warren von Braun, he's like a legit Nazi, ended up really high up. I don't know if he was running NASA, but he was the guy who was leading,
the face of NASA.
Leading the space race.
He designed the rocket that got us to the moon, bro.
Right, the legit Nazi.
Yeah.
And so we imported them, and the Russians got some too.
We painted them in mainstream culture the same way we paint Walt Disney.
Yeah.
And this guy was
was
hanging Jews outside of his office in Germany.
It's pretty nuts, man. The history's kind of dark with that. It's really dark. It's as dark as you get. But we used them. We're like, all right, instead of being in jail, why don't you come work for us? And they did, and then that's the reason we were able to go to the moon with that technology that we basically stole from the Nazis. And the theory is that when you start looking at the Third Reich and all that stuff, is like, okay, how the hell did you guys get this advanced technology? Like how
they were fresh off of a World War I loss,
right? Like why are you doing all this? Why do you have all these different sauce? Why do you have all this stuff?
Yeah. They even had flying saucers that they were testing, right?
It was just leaps and bounds ahead of where everyone else was at. And you'd think we'd all kind of advanced at a similar level, but it's like one dude was juicing and had a head start of one lap on a 400-mile relay. And it's like, dude, how are you on lap 3? We just hit the gun just went off. Like, what? And so that's really what we were starting to learn out. So then tie this all back. So we did that with the help of the Nazis. We went to the moon.
So talk about timeline. Operation Paperclip is like 60s, 70s, right?
Yeah.
Like right
I
after
think
World
it's
War II.
the 40s to the 60s or 40s to 70s, right? You could loosely ballpark it there.
So
again,
then
I don't know the
before
dates.
that, like World War II is where you're at now. Like before that, the Third Reich and stuff.
Well, I mean, I was just talking like a big point that I've been thinking of recently is, okay, secret space programs. We know that there probably has to be something going on because the point I was making is like, we went to the moon in the late 60s.
69.
It's been, 69. Thank you. I know 68 or 69. I have that Even Stevens song in my head when it plays.
Went to the moon in 1969.
Yeah. Not 1968, but a day later. Yeah, that one. I know. So funny.
Me and you had the same childhood, I swear.
Yeah, it's great.
That's why we're so similar today.
Disney originals, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, but 60 years has passed. If we can go to the moon in like sub 10 years from the time we want to do it and get in a flex match with Russia, what could we do with 60? I mean, look at this iPhone, dude. This is a supercomputer in our hands. And like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? It didn't even exist. Or the iPhone 1 could hold 100 songs. And in 20 years, we do that. So like, what the hell with all that money, NASA, like have we been doing for 60 years? And so that's why I don't believe the whole narrative that like, oh, NASA's going, we're in space, we're doing this stuff. I think that's a PR front. We have like a black ops
So
secret
you think we've been in space
program.
for a while?
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
I don't see another answer. What, we just
agree.
pull the plug? No, the funding's still going there.
You
So
know
what are you
what's
guys
crazy?
doing? Just buying new office chairs? Like, we definitely have, it's like billions and I think it's even trillions of dollars.
It's like $22 trillion of untracked money. And here's what's crazy. I think it was Bernie Sanders, potentially. One of the
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. One of these guys who's a relevant politician today. I think it was the day before 9/11. He's presenting to Congress talking about how, we went over budget by $22 trillion. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you fucking go over budget by $22 trillion? Is there even that much money in circulation?
You drill holes in mountains and run your stuff
I believe it was a
underground.
secret space force. Next day, September 11th happens.
Yeah, so everyone forgot about it.
World Trade Center 7 gets knocked down. Anything that would have been able to track where that shit was, destroyed. And here's what's crazy about the UFO conspiracy is it's the one conspiracy that can take claim over every significant event. JFK, World War II, the 9/11. UFO people want to own all of it. But like I said, it's just like, well, that's a crazy connection. And that's how it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nuts. This is why I'm so excited about Elon Musk and SpaceX.
I want to know what Elon Musk knows about this whole thing.
I don't know if he knows. I honestly think he's just an entrepreneur who's like, space is badass. Why haven't you guys done anything in 60 years or whatever?
And NASA's probably just laughing behind him because he's spending how many billions of dollars to send this rocket into space with fossil fuels when they probably already have shit that can just zip to space.
They partner with him on it to look like they're helping as a PR front, right?
Yeah.
And that's why they're co-doing it. But once we get to Mars, we're going to learn so much shit about this, dude, because there's all those photos, like the pyramids on Mars, the artifacts on Mars that they're finding in those satellites, but they're really blurry, so you can't tell if it is or it isn't.
The Russians tried to put a rover on Mars twice. Both times it was all systems a go, and then they see this white cigar-shaped thing fly across, shoots their fucking thing out of the sky. They've not been able to land a rover on Mars because something there shoots it out of the sky right when it gets close to Mars.
But we have rovers on Mars now, though. Like Curiosity.
Humans, the U.S. does.
Oh, but the Russians can't?
The Russians can't do it.
So what? The alien races, they're racist? They're like, hey, U.S., you're good. Yeah. Russians, we don't like you guys.
I like to even address that, I feel like I got to give context. So like for me, the easiest way to do it is because you're kind of like the way you and I are jumping through the timeline. Yeah. And I'm thinking to someone who has no idea what we're talking about, we got to start through the timeline so they kind of see how this plays out. So I don't know. I want to just tell the story of like how I understand it, right?
Yeah, go for it.
So from what I understand and kind of just piggybacking off what you said, the Nazis in the World War II, they were doing remote viewing and like fucking channeling things with these weird psychic people who were there, right? In Germany. They were Germans. I forget their name, but you can look it up. And they, through like how psychics like write stuff, wrote down schematics just like remotely with their eyes closed that was actually intelligible for like building an anti-gravity machine. All right. And so now the government gets involved, the Nazis, they start looking into this, start working with it, and they start working on flying saucers of their own. They start working on the Glock, the bell or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And so the whole time throughout World War II, Adolf Hitler and all of his shit, and you can watch this in any World War II documentary, is saying, we have secret weapons. Just wait. We're on the forefront right now. They're not going to be able to hold us back when they see what we have, right?
It's going crazy. Yeah.
So moral of the story is I think and this is around the time where the U.S. and people on the ally side start seeing UFOs and documenting it for the first time in modern history. What they call them is Foo Fighters. Back in the day, we're flying the planes in World War II, trying to fight the Nazis, and we see these balls of light flying next to these planes that can zip and do maneuvers that are just not possible. And so look up Foo Fighters. There's even pictures of Foo Fighters, and there's even a band named after them. Okay, so. And the only reason I looked into the Foo Fighters and connected this dot is because going back to what's his face, Blink 182, Tom DeLonge.
Yeah.
He says he thinks that the Nazis were the ones who, it was their flying saucer that went down in Roswell. And I was like, wait, that's different than anything I've ever heard. So let me look into this. And this is when I started looking into Nazis. And this is actually ironically when I found out that you were into it, because you were talking about the same Nazi thing. Nazis. So apparently, from what I understand, is the Nazis tried to put machine guns on this anti-gravity machine that doesn't operate on the same laws of physics, basically, right? And so these machine guns that shoot projectiles that move faster than light of the speed of light, they're just getting blown to bits, right? These guns are not working because they're on flying saucers that are inhuman.
Yeah, like
right?
Austin Powers sharks with laser beams.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that. And so that's why they were able to get these Foo Fighters, theoretically, that could fly and do these things, but they couldn't weaponize them. They couldn't figure out how to do it. So eventually they have to surrender World War II. And here's the theory, and this is also like independent non-UFO research. They think Hitler escaped to Argentina.
Yeah. And there's a huge German community down there.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're like, where the fuck
did
these
mini
people
Germany
come from?
down there. Yeah.
And so here's kind of where
German,
I found,
all have the same culture. Like, yeah.
Damn.
Like even Nazi paraphernalia and stuff down there. It's pretty common. Yeah.
Damn.
It's nuts.
So apparently they go make their way to
Antarctica. Yeah, that's crazy.
And that's what the current theory is that the Nazis escaped to Antarctica with the flying saucer technology, and a lot of the,
you can see it going in and out of like the ice things.
If you go on Google Earth, there's a big gaping hole in the middle of
whole one.
Yeah.
That's nuts. And you can't fly over it. There was a pilot who did, and then he immediately got swarmed as soon as he landed by government officials.
Really?
Yeah, like instantly. And they were like, "You can't do that. What'd you see?" All this stuff, and he just started getting interrogated and whatnot. But I've seen that hole that you're talking about. I know exactly the thing. I forget what it's called.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nuts. And the theory is that they have the bases. They all escaped to Argentina and Antarctica, and they were doing their research down there and all that stuff.
Yeah. So then here's the other one that you were talking about. You were telling me about this a few weeks ago. So Roswell happens 1947, 2 years after the end of World War II. Most people think, oh, it's a flying saucer, gets covered up by the government. Next day, they're like, it's a weather balloon.
Yeah.
When in reality, the actual wreckage, and this is, I don't know, I feel like this is actual documented. The actual wreckage was actually flown via 2 airplanes to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they flew it in 2 airplanes just in case one of them crashed because they didn't want to lose the technology.
Yeah.
All right, so they get there at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base where they think it is today. But anyways, Tom DeLonge says he thinks it was Nazi, right? So then I'm thinking back to the fucking Antarctica theory of how World War II really ended. And then what's the operation where we actually sent people down there and they got attacked by something?
Oh yeah, and they had that big war and there were U-boats there and all that.
What was
stuff.
the name of that
I forget
operation?
that name. Got it. Yeah.
It's like Moonshine or something.
Yeah. Operation Moonshine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so apparently they go down there. They're fully militarized, but then they get hit with resistance by an enemy that they can't. And they're so vague on what they say publicly or whatever was made public.
Yeah.
And they come back defeated with a lot of casualties and whatnot. So if you think, oh, Nazis are really down there, and maybe they've probably figured out how to militarize these advanced ships.
Yeah.
Right. And then here's where shit kind of gets off the wall. Because then you go on to Gaia and they're talking all these people who are just making shit up.
Yeah, dude, making shit, killing the rep of any credible person who's seen.
But they
some
were
real
talking
shit.
about the secret Space Force a year before Donald Trump comes out with the actual Space Force.
Yeah, Gaia to me, like I subscribed for yearly because I thought I was going to use it all the time, and I even bought their stock and didn't do anything, so I sold it.
Yeah.
But dude, there was a documentary on there where I was watching this guy who had like these 2 little hoop earrings, and he was like this really skinny, like 100-pound guy, just for some visual stuff. And he was claiming that he, for 20 years of his life, was abducted and virtually shuttled to Mars every day to fight a war against 3 other alien races. And I'm just sitting there like, I don't believe, like, if you went to a shooting range, you could not shoot a gun. So like, how am I supposed to believe that you're in a top secret government military thing? Like, it just doesn't add up. It was the biggest lie I've ever heard. My girlfriend walked in, I was watching it. She's like, well, this guy's full of shit. Like, this is the craziest. What are you watching? Yeah. I'm like, no, I swear. I'm like, I don't believe it. But
Gaia
like,
gets out there for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, well, like that discredits all the real stuff that like Roswell and all these other theories that at least have some backbone to them. Yeah, it's just funny.
Yeah.
So where are you? You're at the Antarctica.
So Tom DeLonge, here's where his theory kind of gets. I'll kind of go through Tom DeLonge's theory, and then Mike Shower, who's going to be on the podcast next week.
Oh yeah, he's into it. He's deep.
He's deep, bro.
He's deep.
He's deeper than he leads on.
Oh yeah.
Same with you. I feel like.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, and so he told me, because I sent him the Tom DeLonge thing. So I'll talk about what Tom DeLonge says happens, and because he's working with the government, and then I'll kind of say what he's saying. But basically, Tom DeLonge is on the front that UFOs are bad and they're hostile against us and these aliens, right? And so what they think happened, or what he thinks happened, is like when we created the nuclear bomb, that's when flying saucers started appearing, and it's because nuclear bombs by nature happen on the quantum level. You send 2 molecules together and you split them.
You use the energy, and that's
all
what
the
happens.
energy, right? And so that's exactly. That's what happens. And so this was affecting things on a quantum level, which, if you know anything about quantum physics, you take a light particle here and you take its twin and move it across the universe.
Yeah, they both move.
They both do the same thing at the same moment. Mirror each other.
They don't even know how it works. That's the crazy part.
Right. So this is a real thing that's been proven by science can actually happen, a phenomenon on the quantum level, right?
And everything's energy at the subatomic particle, 0.00000 to the nth degree,
right?
0.1% matter or something. It's mostly energy.
What's crazy is in physics class in college, we had one worksheet we had to do as an assignment was to calculate the frequency of a car or this plant because we all have frequency, and the way you can actually measure it is only when we pass through a slit. And so you think about the slit experiment, and you shine a laser beam through a slit, and it breaks off into other separate laser beams.
It goes two doors. Yeah. The double slit test.
The double slit test, right? And so using that kind of like line of thinking and learning about frequency, when I walk through a doorway, I'm technically passing through a slit, and you can measure my frequency at that moment in time. And so when you think about it, studying organic chemistry, I have a biology degree. You go down, like you said, to the subatomic level, past the atom, past the electron. What is it? You got quarks and like neutrinos and things that are blinking in and out of existence, right? And it's just energy. Which is crazy, like you said.
And consciousness is the only thing that separates us from the plant, because this has it too. You know, like this has subatomic particles at the very quantum level. It's the same thing. It's like 99.99999 to the nth degree, keep going, % empty space, right? And it's energy. And same with us, all our cells right there. And the cells make up your organs, which make up your body, which make up your, you know, all these different systems working together. So I think the only thing that separates us from that is consciousnh, which is a whole other hour and a half, you know, that we don't have time to get into. But
well, we'll get into it because that's part of his fucking story. Well, on this fucking energy thing, I heard. Do you know who Lawrence Krauss is? He's like a physicist.
No.
He's like, he'll be on like any of these like universe documentaries, but not like the alien stuff. But I was listening to an interview of his, and he studies this stuff. He's an actual scientist, right? And he was talking about the Higgs boson particle. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So the Large Hadron Collider,
in Sweden, right?
That's what they were looking for. Yeah, they were looking for the Higgs boson particle, which happens when you smash these things and all these subatomic particles pop out, right? So they actually found it, and the Higgs boson particle is basically proof of the Higgs boson field, which helps like really unify a lot of our theories of science and physics. And the Higgs boson field is actually in existence at all times, and it's actually what allows physical things to take physical form. And the way he described it, and I'm not him by any means, so I'm just basically trying to parrot what I believe he said from memory, right? So he said the way the Higgs boson field works is like all of the particles, we're just made of dust, right? And all that stuff. And he says what gives us shape, this thing can be a plant, is that when that comes into interaction with the boson field, it kind of just slows it down. Whereas like without the Higgs boson field, it'd just be like, we're just be floating in molasses.
So that's what kind of glues it together. Yeah, it gives it some form. Because that's one thing you can struggle with when you hear that, like, what, everything is energy? That's just some sweaty dude in Whole Foods, like, peace, man, everything's energy. You know, like there's actually science behind it at the quantum level, right? But what actually glues the energy together if everything is just dissolving in empty space?
So going back to consciousness, how that relates to...
Wait, sorry, I want you to finish the point about the nuclear UFO stuff, because you showed me that article, and it said something like they were monitoring our nuclear plants, which they do. There's more UFO sightings by them. And then our nuclear weapons, because something's changing or it's mirroring in space and time, that freaking nuclear stuff is the only thing that can interfere with their technology.
So a lot of the government whistleblowers who have come out of the woodworks in recent years pushing for disclosure, which has kind of led to them releasing videos and stuff, they're people who worked on these nuclear test sites as officers, as physicists, whatever it is. And around when nukes were being stored, 50s, 60s, 70s, for that whole time period, right? These nuclear bombs during the Cold War would theoretically just like, there would be a UFO, people would be like, yo, what's this thing floating above? And then 10 nukes would get disactivated all at once. Or it would just, they completely lose control and they would start firing up. And so these phenomena were happening. And then even when they started trying to shoot them into space during the Cold War, there was actual, and people have come out as whistleblowers witnessing this. It was the cameraman, I believe. I saw he was the one being interviewed about this, and the footage doesn't exist because the government took it. Right? But basically what the footage shows, and he was the cameraman, and he didn't see it until the officers brought him in to see if he saw what was on the footage. And they showed him the footage, and they're like, well, what do you think that is? He goes, well, it looks like a UFO, sir. And they go, well, don't talk about this ever again. And then he never saw the footage again. And what happened was they shot a nuke into space, and a little flying saucer came, and this thing is going like 3,000 miles an hour, the nuke, because it's going into space, and it had to go into orbit. So it's going thousands of miles an hour, and this little flying saucer zips up, gets right next to it, shoots a laser beam at it, flies in front of it, shoots a laser beam at it. And so keep in mind, this thing has immense control because it's going in at the right rate it needs to kind of go around this thing that's shooting at 3,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Right. So then it goes in front of it, shoots a laser beam, goes under it, shoots a laser beam, and then the thing falls down to the ground.
Wow.
So I wish that fucking footage existed somewhere. Like people have just tried to create animations of it.
Yeah.
But anyways, so they were shooting them out of space. And the whole thing with Tom DeLonge's theory is he says this is all, the whole Cold War was a big cover up.
Right.
That these are actual hostile aliens that have been here manipulating human DNA for thousands of years, giving us technology consciously or unconsciously, but really they're trying to make sure that we don't advance to a higher level of consciousness. So what they're doing, and this ties into the moon is a satellite theory. They think the moon is a satellite, and inside the hollow moon is just this advanced AI. And so that's why people are afraid of AI taking over the world. I sound crazy right now.
Well,
right?
yeah. No, this is a good point, and it's really important that, like, when you talk about government stuff and space programs, all this aliens, that there might be, it's just as plausible if there are different races of them. Just like your dog Tucker and I have a dog Hondo, like they're a dog, but they're different, right? And they all come from a common ancestor, the wolf or whatever, like a Chihuahua and a Rottweiler are nothing in common. They're totally different, but they're the same thing. So there's probably other alien races, and maybe not all of them are good. Maybe some are malevolent, some are benevolent, and some want to help us and manipulate our DNA so we don't go extinct and do things like bring us technology and like all this stuff. So that's a huge thing that I've been open to in the past couple months. And I've read some more out there hippie stuff. I don't know how the hell you would estimate, but some people say there's like 14 different alien races, up to 14. So, I mean, just picture that instead of just one little gray thing, because that confuses a lot of people when they start getting into aliens, right? They're like, oh, it's just some gray thing. It's like, maybe that's one, maybe lizard people are another, right? Maybe the reptilians or whatever. Who knows?
A lot of the abduction cases, they're talking about this race, and this is common among a lot of abductees. They're talking about they were abducted by a race of aliens that look like humans, but like the Aryan race. So they look Norwegian. They actually call them the Nordics. So they have blonde hair, blue eyes. They look like humanoids. Just like a few differences in the cartilage of the nose and ears.
Whoa. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's really plausible that there's multiple ones. And that's something I've been like, okay. And then if you want to talk about, we're just throwing it all out there. That's kind of the goal of this.
We are going so deep. There's a lot at once.
To throw everything out there and let people be like, I've never thought of it that way. And just take one of these points as a jump off point and do your own research and stuff. That's the best way to learn about anything. So while we're throwing it all out there, one of the big things that I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense is that is it 11 dimensions that we know? 11 known dimensions to us, right?
If string theory is correct, I believe. I believe
if that's
string
correct.
theory is the one that kind of proves the other dimensions.
So we have other dimensions, let's just say. And they say that through psychedelics, which I don't do psychedelics. I even get paranoid on weed. I wish I didn't, but I'm terrible at that. I've never done them. But they say, and it's reported people see the same things, and that could be you accessing a different consciousness through different dimensions. So what if one of the ways these races communicate with us, and going back to ancient stuff like Aztecs, Mayans, and all these ancient cultures have psychedelic rituals. Maybe that's one of the ways aliens communicate with us and give us these technological advances is through actually another dimension than what we're seeing right now. Is when you do that, you access it through psychedelic drugs and trips and like ayahuasca ceremonies. You see a serpent, you see a mantis, you see clockwork elves, all these people that you report on really deep levels. Same with mushrooms. If you take the right amount, like go super deep, blast off, it shoots you into that. So maybe that's a way they're communicating with this. And then what Alex Jones says that goes even one step deeper is that this is the secret of top government officials, that they actually do these rituals and psychedelic things, and these elves and stuff, they're like not benevolent, they're like evil, and they try to present themselves as like being good for you, right? And so they're giving them all these ideas. And that's actually what was manipulating Hitler too, is like the same entities that gave him that technology and all that are the same ones that some politicians are doing like rituals on, and why they get so corrupt and evil. And that's like the dark conspiracy side that you can go down and shoot down it. I wouldn't recommend people do that just because it's not going to end anywhere good for you. You're just going to be like, fuck everything, fuck the government, like all this stuff's just like you go crazy if you go that deep. But like psychedelics are another wrench in the gear of like, okay, well, what is that? And you can talk about consciousness. You can talk about historical figures that have done that. You can talk about ancient civilizations. I think that is another form of communication with extraterrestrials.
Right. There's actually a theory, a guy who researched the Holy Grail, kind of like Dan Brown from the Da Vinci Code, right? This guy researched the Holy Grail, and he kind of came to the same conclusion. He believes that in the Bible and all this stuff, a lot of the analogies that they're talking about with angels and Jesus and all the parables are actually analogies talking about psychedelic mushrooms.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. And he's like a legit scientist, you know, who researches this.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some legit people coming out. One guy I really respect, Michael Pollan. He wrote a ton of nutrition books, and I loved his take on it and everything. And he's really just a guy, kind of no bullshit. Everyone says, do this, do this. But he came out with a book on psychedelics. I haven't read it yet, but I hear it's great.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How do we get on psychedelics?
Oh, well, that's different alien races. Maybe one of the ways they communicate is through psychedelic rituals, ancient civilizations. That to me kind of ties everything together.
It like allows us to get on that energetic level.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. And so, you were going through the historical progression of the main theories. And I'm saying, what if the other theory is, that's a very logical way to think about things, that it happens sequentially. But what if a lot of these jumps in technology and communications and different alien races or whatever happen through actual different methods and different dimensions through psychedelics, and maybe some come physically to us when you're not doing it, and we have physical stuff. But dude, why? Okay, this is good. Like, if you're so advanced and you have such an interest in Earth, first off, why would they have such an interest in us? I don't know. Maybe we have minerals here, it's been reported, that are very rare, like gold, in the universe, and they need that to power their spacecrafts and all this other tech, and Earth is rich in it. That's one of the theories of why they're interested in us, and that's why every civilization worships gold, and it's valuable, and we have pyramids, and at the top, gold and gold everything, and that's like a currency. And maybe we're slaves that mine it for them, so they don't have to do the dirty work. But anyway, oh man, I lost the train of thought.
Talking about the summer benevolence.
Interest in us.
Yeah.
Why would they be interested in us? This is what I was gonna say. If you're so advanced, right, that you're out there on your spacecrafts, you have all this technology, why would you show up physically as yourself and risk your life light years away? Even if you could teleport, why risk it? Like, you mentioned you Google Earthed Area 51 and you're browsing around on Area 51 on Google Earth, right? You wouldn't actually go there with a camera like, I'm going to break into Area 51. No, that's stupid, because it's going to be a waste of time. You're probably not going to see anything.
So it's
and there's a better
view. Show up here physically.
Exactly. So what a theory that I really like is that they're avatars. So those gray bodies, that's nothing more than just an avatar. And they're just kind of maybe remote viewing or manipulating through AI or whatever, some advanced thing. And that's not them. That's just a little robot body, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's really cool to me. I'm like, oh, that would make sense. Because, you wouldn't show up physically if you're so advanced. You wouldn't risk yourself, or you wouldn't go through all the effort. You would just manipulate your drone to do that.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I've been like, oh, makes sense.
I would wonder the same thing, too. I feel like I've definitely heard that theory as well. And I why not? You can't disprove it, you know. Even with the whole Commander Fravor, where he saw the Tic Tac and it was kind of just bouncing around like a little fucking, and it had no windows. So if it had no windows, what if it's just like a little drone? You know, you don't know that.
Yeah, it could very well be a drone. I mean, again, our advances in technology, even in 20 years, have gotten, exponential. It's crazy to think that it wouldn't keep doing that. And even who knows what tech's going to be in the next 10 years? Like, next 100 years, maybe they're 1,000, 3,000 years ahead. Could you imagine? Like, the advancement for us is going like, so like up here to down here might only be like 10 years, but then manipulate that another 10 years. It's up here another 10. So we don't we always think of aliens with our human brains and like what we have in front of us, like a spacecraft. Well, where did they get the gasoline? Oh, well, where did they they have an army.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's
We just assume we have to go there the slow way.
Yeah,
with
light years away.
Yeah, with
it's
fossil fuels.
and that's what pisses me off about scientists and astronomers talking about stuff is like, well, you can't travel. It's impossible because you need to break the speed of light, and it's thousands of light years away to the nearest planet. So therefore, life doesn't exist because we haven't been. I'm like, dude, if you're looking at those jumps in tech, it's stupid and really dumb to think and arrogant to think that we're not going to get better past gasoline and fossil fuels and even how fast we can go.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, to me, it's more crazy to think that we're alone or that we haven't been contacted by extraterrestrials of some form that aren't more advanced than us when we have a lot of evidence for it. We have ancient civilizations where we still have questions. We're like, how the hell did that happen?
Yeah.
And our technology will seem archaic to wherever they're at.
Here's what's even crazier about that. I'm going to try to blow your mind here. Thinking about kind of like, what were you saying? You were saying about, I just lost my train of thought.
I was talking about archaic technological exponential growth.
Yeah.
Why would they come here as an avatar?
So I'll make the point. I feel like I'll remember how it connects. But like, look, if I heard Lawrence Krauss, same guy, he was saying, if you change the way you think about, because you're talking about, well, scientists mainstream like to say, we can't go there. That's a million light years away.
Right.
So think about, why do we call it a light year? Well, because that's the distance it would go, a light particle would go in a year, right? But what is a year? A year is a man-made creation to describe one revolution of our planet around our sun. So our units of time are dependent on our place in space and our relativeness to the sun, right?
Yeah.
So an ancient civilization might measure time completely different if they measure time at all. So here's what's even crazier. This guy, Lawrence Krauss, was saying this is actual scientific fact. I forgot the name of this kind of the way this law of science or whatever, but he says if you changed in our modern science the charge of a proton to negative, you just arbitrarily were like it's negative, and you change an electron to positive charge, it wouldn't change a damn thing about the way we understand laws of physics, because positive charge and negative charge is just our way to describe, the molecule is pointed this way and then the molecule is pointed that way. It's arbitrary labels we put on what we can observe. Like our understanding of how we get here to there is based on how much time does it take. But time for us is a man-made created thought based on our place in space.
Right. It's relative.
So based on what you were saying, what if our understanding of physics is actually not how physics actually works at all, right?
Yeah.
People thought the earth was flat and it got them through the day, but then they found out it wasn't flat. So what if we're really like on a physics understanding level, we're the flat earthers to the way this shit actually works.
Right. It might very well be. And it is more, you have to be really certain that there's no other form of life out there. You know, you can fit, I was doing a TikTok on this, so it's fresh in my head, on facts that I was looking up and whatnot. It sounded like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Our sun, okay, let's just start there. It's so fucking big. You know how many Earths we can fit in the sun?
How many?
1.3 million.
Damn.
That's how big our sun is. But in the grand scheme of things, we have a small sun.
Yeah.
Right? So if the person watching this right now, if they draw a little I, just an average handwriting, a lowercase I, with a line and a dot, that one dot right there represents the size of our sun right now, okay? Well, then our sun, compared to the size of our galaxy, is that dot. That's how fucking big our galaxy is. That one little dot right there on that eye, that's our sun, which 1.3 million Earths can fit in, and the galaxy is the actual size of Earth. Like, Earth is huge to us right now, but like in the grand scheme of the galaxy, nothing. Then they also say that there's more galaxies than if you took all the sand on every single beach, every single grain of sand you could find. There's more galaxies out there in the entire universe. Like, and there might be a multiverse, and there might be multiple universes and whatever. And at the center, there's a giant black hole that's exactly, precisely, mathematically like 0.01% or something like that. Yeah. The actual matter of all the galaxies. So when you start adding up like the just sheer volume of where we are, and we're this little speck. I believe we are spiritual beings having temporary human experience. That's what I believe. But whatever you believe, like, we're so small in the grand scheme of things, if you look at it logically like that, to say that there's nothing else out there, to me, in my opinion, is more crazy than to say there is. And that's it.
Yeah. Think about like that is fucking crazy. Like, I think I heard a stat, something like along those lines, where if you think about the grains of sand on all the beaches in the earth, right? There's still, we can see in our night sky, we can see more galaxies that are just as big as our galaxy, if not way bigger. We can see as many more than there are grains of sand on the entire earth, right? Each one, so we can observe, the way she said it, there is 100 billion galaxies that we can physically observe, right? So you look through a telescope, you zoom in on it real close. That star that you thought was a star is actually an entire galaxy. There's 100 billion of those that we can see. And inside of each galaxy is 100 billion stars, just like the star that we live around, right? And each one of those stars, 100 billion, inside of 100 billion of them, has at least a few planets around them, a lot of them, most of them, right? So how naive are we to think that we are the only planet that has life? And if you even, so this was blowing my mind about the galaxy documentary I was watching last night on Netflix. If you think about our galaxy, and they kind of panned out, and we're thinking macro scale here, and they kind of panned out, they said our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is in a cluster in our point in space of about 30 galaxies. And the closest, one of them is 2 million light years away, and it's called the Andromeda galaxy. And the Milky Way and the Andromeda are similar in size, but in our cluster of 30 plus, they're a lot bigger than the ones around us, right? And so when I'm thinking about comparing our galaxy and how similar it is to this galaxy and how similar it is to that galaxy, right? Yeah. I'm thinking, well, if that galaxy looks like ours and is similar to ours and has the same laws of physics as ours that we can observe, how crazy would it be for us to think that we're the only one that formed a planet that can form life? You know what I'm saying? In my head, it's actually way more believable to think that there's a lot of life than there is that we're the only ones.
And this is very hard for an ego to accept. And I've been deep diving since I moved to Arizona, really into spirituality. And like, I used to get really, I think men particularly have this chip on their shoulder where we need to leave a mark, right? We need to be known for something. We need our name on a library. Otherwise, what is my life for? Like, I need to leave a legacy. I need to make it. And typically that comes in the form of having a family, right? And that's great. Or the other form for men, normally it's like making a shit ton of money so I can be high status, right? That's what people want. But when we're talking about the grand scheme of things and what a spec we are, does it A, even really matter? And then B, more logically and less spiritual on this grand scheme, right? Where we're talking about grains of sand or galaxies, like, yeah, we really don't matter. But like, do you even remember the middle 20 or 30 presidents? Can you list them off the top of your head? No. And they made it to the motherfucking top of the status symbol. Rich, famous, powerful men on earth. You can't even remember the middle 30. Yeah, they're recorded in history books, but who really looks? We can't even say them off the top of their head. And those are guys who have left a mark, right? So coming to terms with the fact that we, 2 generations from now, like our great grandkids aren't going to remember us. And I know this sounds so negative and like, damn, that's dark, dude. But like, to me, it's been the most freeing thing when you can drop this whole need of, I have to leave a mark, otherwise my life is meaningless. No, your meaning of life is to be present here right now, enjoy the fucking ride, strap yourself in, have some fun, be present in the moment, because the whole myth of needing to lead a mark is your false ego and not your higher consciousness really trying to speak and take over and live from that, dude. And so like, I don't know, man, we're just so microscopic in the grand scheme of things. And I've found a lot of peace in that instead of the dark doom and gloom. I always try to go to the light, and I'm like, that's really freeing to me of like being able to drop that. And I think that comes with age too. Like as we're both approaching our 30s, right? It's like, you know, when you're an 18-year-old kid, you got all this energy with you and you're like, oh, I got to be remembered. I got to figure everything out. And then when you get older, you realize that the things you really want in life don't require money. The ocean still feels as good when you're swimming in it if you have $1 million. If you have $0, you know, I've known because I've had $0 and it felt great. I was in Hawaii backpacking around. So like, the good conversations, good friends, like this stuff is true at the core of like what we need as humans, and like not the false stuff of like bigger and better and egoic. And I think that like to tie it back into the alien stuff, maybe that's how they're manipulating us through fear and war and all this stuff, is like they're pumping up our ego. And that's a very masculine energy, right? And it's very masculine. It's very like, fight, go for it, leave your mark. Yeah, you can do it, humans. And that's like a malevolent evil force. Maybe that is Satan, if you want to go with that, right? Or Lucifer, which just means bringer of light. It's some weird translation. Maybe the more feminine approach, right? You've heard the saying, the future is female. Well, maybe that's a metaphor for saying we're coming out of that egoic leave a mark, you know, we have to be significant energy, and we're merging more into this feminine energy of like higher consciousness, where we're all waking up and we're all really stepping into things. And that has nothing to do with gender. It's just the energies we all have. And so I don't know, man, I really see that as the awakening that people are talking about. I know you're looking at me like I'm crazy. You didn't ask a single question, but I'm
just letting you go.
Yeah, I'm just riffing on it, man, because like I think all this higher power stuff, when you start looking at aliens and why you guys talking about that and races and conspiracies and stuff, it's about truth, and it's about why are we really here. And I think that when you start looking at it, even regardless of what's happening out there, we're here to be here now. To me, that's the most freeing stuff out there. And that's why I can sleep at night and still geek the fuck out on conspiracies and aliens and still keep a level headed and not lose your mind with it. And I think that's really important for people to realize. Otherwise, you will lose your mind and think the whole world is evil and go into hell in a handbasket. You got to embrace it.
So do you feel like your motivation to looking into the whole what's really going on is like kind of finding peace with your place in the universe?
I think so. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. I think that the reason a lot of the stuff we've been talking about is not public, I think, and maybe this is being naive, I don't think there's some evil death cult wanting to blow us all up. I think it's actually good a lot of it's not public, because look at what happened with freaking COVID, and the world being quarantined in their homes lost their minds. You know what I mean? Like, imagine if we got leaked that we were having communication for 3 decades with an extraterrestrial race. Oh yeah, in the Cold War, that wasn't actually us versus Russia. It was actually like aliens being involved, and we were actually on the same team, and like our secret government programs are working together. Like all that stuff was public, and like I don't know if it is true, but if it was, the world I think would fundamentally fall apart. Like I don't think a lot of humans would have the self-awareness.
Well, that's why Tom DeLonge says they're not disclosing it.
Exactly. And so I actually think it's a good thing. A lot of the secrets are secret. You know, I like talking about what we know and speculating and stuff, but I don't view it as some like evil cover up where there's cigar filled rooms and people plotting this out. I think it's humans, and I'd like to think that there's some people who know more than us that have everyone's best interest and have a soul and a high level of self-awareness.
So let me ask you this: moral of the story, do you believe that aliens exist, or should I say extraterrestrials? And do you believe that they are here? And third question, do you believe they're from another planet or another dimension?
I think yes to all of them. I think it's possible, all of them.
Okay.
I think you can be in other dimensions and from another planet. I mean,
So you think they definitely exist, and you think they're here?
Definitely. And I think they have multiple ways of communicating. That's, to my best estimate, through all the research, through everything. And who knows, I might change my mind in 5 years, you know, if new research comes forward or stuff.
Do you feel like there's anybody in the government who actually interacts with them and talks to them and studies them? Or do you think it's more of a remote thing that we just see them in the sky every now and then?
I think there has to be, you know, don't you? Like, I don't see any way. Yeah, I think there has to be.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's kind of where I just find it an entertaining story to read and try to figure out the clues like a detective. But for me, what I know to be true, or at least fully believe that it might be true, is that there are definitely UFOs. Now, here's where I know I've sounded crazy earlier in this podcast, but I'm truly trying to be a little bit skeptical, so that way I don't go down the crazy parts of the rabbit hole. Because I believe even if I see a UFO, how do I know that's not some man-made creation?
Yeah, or ours that we're trying to test out.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we know that it's alien? And I think for me, I would have to see an actual, even if I saw a UFO, I still wouldn't fully know that it was extraterrestrial until I saw the being that was operating it.
Yeah.
And I guess my interest is, one, I want to know, what does the government know? Is it true? And why are they covering it up? And then secondly, I want to know, do we know them? Are we cool with them? Can we study them? Can we go to their planet? Can I visit another galaxy safely and return home and go to bed at night, you know? Because that's the shit that I would want to do. And unfortunately, I don't think in my lifetime I'll ever see at least our civilization get to the point where we can do that.
So you want to take the red pill. It really is analogous to the Matrix. I mean, really, like the whole UFO, extraterrestrial, what is the meaning of life? Like,
dude, I want to be the real life Star Wars. I want to be traveling to another planet in another galaxy. How crazy would it be if I was able to visit a planet that was safe for me to visit and a fun place to go, like going on vacation to Las Vegas, that's not even in our galaxy, but across the universe, not even in a nearby galaxy.
Yeah.
How crazy would that be, bro?
This is the thing. All my friends, when I asked them about space tourism and Mars and all, you know, like who wanted to send people to Mars, but it was pretty much a one-way mission, and like they had 100,000 people apply in like a month, right? Just like, I don't care, I have nothing here, and the applications were super dark and sad. Bro, if space tourism was legal, I don't think I'd go.
Why?
I don't want to. Like, I love it on Earth. I think we're living in one of the best times to be alive, with a lot of freedom, with a lot of people here. I think that is why we're here. You know, if you believe in reincarnation or what, maybe we're reincarnated to love this human experience on Earth and here, and finding peace with the simplicity of it. I think that when you start adding on galaxies and travel and dimensions and light speed and technology, it just gets too complex. And I'm not saying I want the blue pill. I want to see the red pill and the blue pill, and I want to know everything in the red pill and then be okay with the blue pill. Does that make sense? Like, I don't think that's settling or that's a bad thing at all. I think that's a gift, because I've had times where it was never enough and I needed more, you know, more money, more women, more alcohol, more stimulation, and that's never made me happy in my life. And I think the only times I've ever gotten glimpses of true happiness and true whatever bliss was in the present moment. And so I don't think that stuff of other dimensions or other galaxies would actually make me more present, and thus it wouldn't make me happier. So what's the point, you know?
Yeah, you're definitely on like another level of like I'm seeing two sides of the same coin here, because like you even on your channel talk about like law of attraction and energy and stuff, and I'm self-admittedly, to Brian and to a lot of people, like I'm one who struggles to be more on the energetic side as far as like talking about energy, talking about frequencies like this. I'm a very logical person. So like it's almost interesting to hear kind of your motivations and your thoughts about the same things I'm thinking about, but you're using terms like energy, consciousness, and I'm using terms like time, galaxies, light speed, you know, science, logic.
And we're all saying the same thing, but just two languages.
Yeah.
And that's the exact thing I realized about 6 months ago when I had this big reawakening, I would call it, to like more spirituality stuff and Eastern stuff. And before I was like, this is bullshit. I even had friends in the space. I'm like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, you can say words and people believe it. Oh, that's crazy. But like now I truly believe this stuff. Not everything. I think I like keep, you know, having my beer too, and like having some level headed with it, not getting totally lost in the crystals and sage. But like, you know, it is two sides of the same coin. You brought up a good point. It's like masculine, feminine ways of explaining things. And it's like, you can be all science and logic to explain what the meaning of life is. And I think that's what like Tony Robbins and business and like the self-development camp goes after, and productivity. It's like really trying to figure out how to be happy with all the craziness going on. And then you have the Eastern camp, which is more like, you know, the yogis and the spirituality and the Eastern stuff and love. And like that's saying a lot of the same stuff that this is saying, or Stoic philosophers, right? You could put that in this camp as masculine and feminine energy. And we're both saying the same thing. And the beauty is walking that middle path and having both, that you don't have to choose either or. You say yes and. And that's even what the Buddha spoke about, is like the middle path. That was like his biggest teaching, is like the middle path, right? And I think everyone's saying the same thing. It's just accepting them both.
It's so I don't know. I think for me, like, cause you mentioned a couple of times, you're like, would that make me happy to kind of go down that side? And I even think for me, like, it's not even like a happiness thing. I don't think I'll be more or less happy when I find out the answer to any of these questions, right? I think for me, it's more like intrigue. I'm intrigued at the missing part of the story that I'm living in, this existence that I have, this experience I'm having in my human experience or whatever. I just want to make sense of it. Like, even to the point where I'm intrigued enough to where I was telling Kate today, I was like, I thought about the other night just buying a calculus textbook and like teaching myself calculus. Is that weird? I don't know. Cause I think for me, I'm like, I just want to understand how it works. Kind of like in the same way an engineer, some guy who's just building shit in high school just becomes an engineer naturally because he's just interested in building shit. I think I'm just interested in understanding fundamentally how that thing works.
Yeah, the curiosity, that's what you got. And that's a gift, dude. That a lot of people actually have, but it's masked by distractions, intoxicants, and delusions. Like it is. And so I think that the more curious you can get, and this is, I know we're off the alien subject briefly, but like, you know, some life advice based on what I found out that makes me happy and I know works for people is like, the more curious you can get about things, the happier you will be, because happiness is a bullshit word. You can say I'm totally happy shooting heroin, but we know that's not happiness. That's like a state, right? You know, you can say, oh, I'll be totally happy when I win the lottery, but you survey lottery winners and within a year, they're sometimes less happy and they, you know, it makes like a 10% difference. So like, what is happy? Happiness is so arbitrary. I think a better question is what excites you, because where that energy is of excitement, dude, that's what makes you feel alive. And when you're alive, you're in the present moment and you can't help but feel happy. You don't even think about being happy because you just are. And that's what we really want. So I think like, the more you can tap into that present moment, which comes from excitement, which comes from curiosity, it's reawakening those gifts inside of you, dude, of like, oh, what did I want to do when I was 14 years old? When I was 14 years old, you know, I wanted to do, I played basketball all day. I remember being at the skate park all day or like playing basketball for 8 hours and time was just a blur. Time was an illusion, right? The more you can tap into that stuff, dude, the more alive you'll be and the more happy you will be. It's really excitement. That's what we want.
You so you actually used to go to skate parks when you were a kid?
I did go to skate parks. No basketball.
Skateboarding?
Yeah, I was terrible. I was terrible at skateboarding. I realized I was a musician, not an athlete at a very young age.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your athletic experience was trying to skateboard?
Yeah, pretty much. But I was too scared to drop in, right? Because I saw this guy like just bust open his knees and scream down there on the concrete. And I'm like, you know what? I'll pass, guys. Like, I'll go with you to the skate park, but
Yeah.
I
got into a skating phase when I was in 4th and 5th grade, because this kid who, this is a kind of a story that really did come full circle, because it really, I think, sparked me to want to break away from the mainstream. Because when I was in 5th grade, I was in this small Christian school. So there's 8 people in my class, and we're the 5th graders in this school. And one of the kids who was new that year, and he lived in my neighborhood, so I've kind of just known him throughout the years, especially since that small class in 5th grade. His name is Sean Malto. You know who Sean?
Shout out Sean.
You know who Sean Malto is?
No, I don't. Is he a pro skater?
Oh, like super big pro skater.
Sounds like a pro skater.
Well, when we're 5th grade, we're like 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so first day, this kid brings his skateboard to school, and his parents were military at the time, so they would, he had moved here from Hawaii, looks like a kid from Hawaii, wearing a Hawaiian shirt,
Johnny
I'm sure.
Tsunami.
He looked like Johnny Tsunami, like dark skin and dark features, really tan. Anyways, he built on this basketball court that nobody was using, or like this tennis court on the fort there, Fort Leavenworth, a little homemade skate park, and so many kids used it. And I remember he would bring his skateboard to school, and my entire class, all 8 of us, and then the class above us and the class below us, everybody got into skateboarding because Sean Malto would talk about CCS, the magazine, and he would
CCS.
He would show us the decks you could buy and the trucks you could buy.
Yeah.
And then his brothers were also in the school, so they were also big into skateboarding too.
Yeah.
And Sean was like really good as a 10-year-old. Like, I'm not talking like, oh, that kid's got talent as a skateboarder. I'm talking this kid's doing tricks that they're doing on Tony Hawk Pro Skater, the game.
Right.
You know,
like, Pizza Boy.
Yeah. And so I had known this kid throughout the years. We'd in college and high school, met at parties. We're in the same town. I ended up going to a different school the following year anyway, so that's why I threw that in. But moral of the story is, I'm in college and I'm studying for like an organic chemistry test or something. I'm 20 years old. I'm broke as fuck, and I'm sitting in my 4-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates, and I'm studying for this exam that I don't want to be taking. And I have TV on in the background. It's on ESPN. I turn around and there's a skateboarding competition. And lo and behold, Sean Malto's on the skateboarding competition. And he won it. It was Rob Dyrdek's skateboarding competition on ESPN. And he won it. It was like a $300,000 check that he won, right?
You call him right up.
No, I didn't have his number. This is years later. So this is in college. And we were in 5th grade together and just grew up in the same town. So we'd see each other off and on. And so literally, I'm sitting there having like a moment of existential crisis. Like 10 years ago, we were in the same room with the same advantages. And here I am. And there he is. He's on TV holding this check. And I'm like, I feel like this makes me want to strive for more. Like, I feel like if we started in the same place, why is he so further up in status and celebrity and money than I am? And so that really was like my first moment of realization, like, am I doing the right thing? Is this really the right way to go? Talking about blue pill, red pill, I think that was the moment I saw the red pill.
Everyone's got that. But like, okay, look at that story. Sean's passion for skateboarding, his excitement, his happiness was like a positive virus that spread to 3 different classes, and you all took up skateboarding because one person was so freaking amped on it. Yeah. Like, that's the power. You really want to leave a mark, you really want to leave a legacy. The best thing you can do is get really excited about stuff. And like, that's infectious, and you really want to change the world, get excited about shit, and that's going to rub off on people and push them to do more. Just like you saw him on 10 years later on TV, like that pushed you to do more. That was inspiring. So that to me is like the ultimate thing we should all be striving for to really change the world, not bitching on social media all day and like trying to take the best selfie. Like, that's why I fucking hate Instagram, dude. And I always cuss too much when I'm here. But like, dude, I've been so discouraged by like the flexing on Instagram. And like, we all go through stages and stuff. But I woke up and I'm like, that's not helping anyone. That actually tears people down, because it's like, oh, compared to that, I'm nothing. That's not inspiring. Flexing is not inspiring. What's inspiring is like education and like infectious energy and like researching stuff and sharing your ideas and getting people to level up faster. That's what a true leader does. A true leader doesn't sit on Instagram with a Rolex and like, fake Gucci's and just sit there like, like that's not leadership. That's ego. And so I don't know how we got on that. You didn't ask a question about it, but like, I feel like it's an important message to share. It's like, compare yourself to the right people, model after the right people, dude. And like, choose who you're comparing yourself to, because that will either elevate you with excitement and joy and happiness, like we've been talking about, right? Or it will suck you down in comparison, right? So excitement elevates you, but comparison of the flex offenders and whatnot like sinks you down, because you're like, I'm never going to be there. And that's something I realized going to all these events and masterminds and spending $66,000 last year just on like travel and events and masterminds and stuff, dude. It was like, I stopped doing that. I haven't been to a single event this year. Don't really have any plans. When I found out you and I made
the same amount of money last year, and then we ended up claiming the same amount of money.
That's so weird.
I knew how much money I spent, and I was like, how the fuck did I end up spending that much money so I could write it all off? And now I'm wondering, how the fuck did Clark spend all that money? And that's where it went, huh?
Mastermind. I don't regret it, dude, but I bought into the your network is your net worth and all this stuff. And like, to a certain degree, that's well and dandy, but like, a lot of the people in the industry don't actually make you happy. I would argue that a lot of the gurus people are watching, because I was in this camp a year or two ago, I'd say 90% of them actually make you less happy than you think. And chances are, if they're entrepreneurs who are like, be more, achieve more, like 7 ways you can become a millionaire, I would argue that that's going to make you less happy, because it's all about them. It's not really about you. And so I unsubscribed from pretty much every YouTube channel. Still subscribe to yours. And
this one?
Yeah. Nice. This both.
Hell
and
yeah.
My happiness, so I can thumbs up them.
Dope.
Yeah.
I'm subscribed to your marketing channel and your main channel.
Oh, nice.
Is that both of them, or do you have more?
Yeah, I don't really do much on the marketing, just the Refusing to Settle one, and get really focused on trying to like lift people up together and like push people to do better, and
how to manifest a text from your ass.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's shit works, dude. It's crazy. If people are laughing, don't knock it till you try it. But anyway, man, like, the money will come when you're excited. That's what I've realized. And like, maybe I wasn't as excited last year, and like the money grew a little bit year after year, but I was never as on fire as I am right now.
How did you get into the law of attraction?
I I would say, so we were talking about college earlier, and I went to that small Christian private school and just got so bored with all my classes and stuff. And I was like, oh God, I would just go on YouTube all day, even when there wasn't that great of content. And I was naturally curious about things, and I kept hearing about energy and attracting and all this stuff. And I really got into it. My room was just plastered with crystals. I had kombucha brewing that was like this big, scobies that big. You know, I'd brew everything. I'd go to the spring nearby that was like 20 miles away. I would drive my little shitty Buick up there and fill up glass jugs, because plastic leaches plastic in there, of spring water to cleanse my body and stuff. So like I was so hippie in college. And then I graduated, and so in that college phase, I was really into law of attraction. I just found it on YouTube. It makes so much sense. I was listening to a lot of Tony Robbins. It was the Eastern spin on it. So I'm like, oh, that's great. It makes sense. And then I kind of graduated college and then fell into that like flex entrepreneur phase where I'm like, oh, I need to make money and like talk about business and all this stuff and compare myself and pay for masterminds and all this stuff, right? And then like it just didn't make me happy. And I realized like I would spend a lot of my day in anxiety, and that was coming from, I feel like this is what Joe Dispenza says. He says anxiety is worrying about your future, right? And there's multiple different forums out there. Don't post in the comments, that's not what anxiety is, Clark. Like it's clinically, everyone wants to like give their definition, but simplify it. Yeah. Anxiety, you're worried about your future. What's going to happen? What are they saying about me? Things that haven't happened yet. Okay. Depression is thinking about your past, right? Oh, why didn't she call me back then? Like, did I really fuck that up in that date? Oh man, I really screwed the pooch at that mastermind. Like I should have said, that's like, I realized I was getting depression from things in my business that I didn't do, missed opportunities, kind of like you were looking and comparing yourself to that kid, but you got inspired by it, which is great. But I would see people and I'd be like, man, if only I'd started a year ago talking about this and comparing. And then my future, I was like, well, if the numbers aren't growing, or if they're growing at this rate, what am I even doing? I'm just wasting my life and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It was making me so unhappy, dude, being in the business space and like talking about all this stuff. I was just unhappy. I wasn't excited. I was burnt out. I was not happy. And then you asked how I got into law of attraction. When I moved here, so I made a decision, like, I just got to mix stuff up, because I've found that mixing stuff up is the fastest way to like try something else, And so I moved here to kind of on a whim to Arizona. I knew some friends here like you and Brian. And I feel like this place, to go really spiritual, has like a different energy than Seattle. Just the weather alone, I mean, being in the sun makes you happier, but it just kind of reawakened me to a lot of the things I was connecting to in college. And I think it's less about how did I get into it and how did I like become open to it, I think is a better way to say it, because I think everyone agrees at a certain level your thoughts create your reality, your beliefs create your reality. But it's like being open to that and embracing that, and not being okay not having all the answers, and dropping the ego to the best we can. We still do it every day, right? Of like needing to be better than people and leaving a mark and all that stuff that doesn't make you happy. That makes sense? Yeah. The short answer is I realized it made me more happy than what I was doing.
So I guess when I think law of attraction, and I keep in mind, I'm coming from the frame of I haven't really gone deep into the law of attraction rabbit hole. In fact, my experience with it, I guess, was a little bit negative in the sense that when I was in high school, my basketball career wasn't panning out the way I would want, and my dad could see that it was eating away at me. My entire senior year, I was just like, I constantly had anxiety and stress because, like you said, I felt like what was happening in the world was not how it was supposed to be in my head. Yeah. I'm specifically related to basketball, right? So I'd spend all day, every day, obsessing about it, working on my game, trying to get better, trying to get more playing time, things like that. And I felt like I never got the recognition I deserved from my basketball coach, because like with all the shit that I was doing, and it was almost like, to me, it felt like I would do good, and then in his head, he would yell at the person who I was against because they did bad rather than me doing good. And it felt like I just couldn't get a win. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so my dad was like, I was a senior in high school, and this is when The Secret got really big, when I was a senior. And my dad watched it, and he's like, hey, you need to come over and you need to watch The Secret. I want you to watch The Secret with me. And my dad is similar to me in the sense that he's a very logical person. Energy is not his thing. It never was. He passed away, so it wasn't his thing. But so the fact that he was saying that to me was significant. And I remember that at the time, I think I was just so in my own head that I was like, fuck this, I don't want to go watch that stupid fucking movie.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to go to the court and play more basketball, right? And so I basically ghosted my dad when he was expecting me to come over and watch the movie. My parents were divorced, so wasn't at his house that week or whatever. So anyways, when I'm in college, around the same time the Sean Malto thing happens, it was like finals. It was like, I remember this because I watched The Secret, and I call my dad. I'm like, hey, Dad. And then I'm like a junior in high school at this point, or a junior in college at this point. So it was like 3 or 4 years later. And I'm like, hey, Dad, I'm watching The Secret finally. It's on Netflix. I'm surprised you didn't bring it up after I didn't watch it with you in high school, because this is a dope-ass movie. Because I was sold. I was like, law of attraction, energy, you attract, you manifest, you think about what you want.
Bob Proctor in there. Yeah.
It's the first time I'd heard about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Bob Proctor was in there?
Yeah. Your thoughts become things. I fucking love Bob Proctor.
He worked for Bob Proctor. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to talk later about that.
Yeah.
I love Bob Proctor.
Really?
Yeah.
So I haven't even looked into Bob Proctor stuff. So anyways, I remember one part in the movie, they were talking about, so I got diagnosed with cancer, and then I found out about the law of attraction, and I thought about overcoming it and beating it, and then I beat it against all the odds.
Yeah.
What's crazy is the week after I watched this movie. So here's the thing. I call my dad in the middle of the movie, and my dad, he was a guy who you would think was like 40s or 50s, but he was actually 65 at this point in time. So but he's also working his ass off. He's one of the he used to, ironically, this is somewhat connected, not completely, but tangentially connected to the alien conspiracy, because he worked for a company called Allied Signal, which is an aerospace company, when I was born. So early 90s. And that company got bought out by Honeywell, big company.
Yeah.
And Honeywell, since he was one of the higher ups in Allied Signal that got bought out, he was now one of the higher ups for helicopter parts sales in Honeywell. So he was like the manager of the whole sales team. And when I'm talking sales team, it's not like these people are calling normal people. It's B2B sales. So he was actually, one of his accounts at this time, around this time, was like the entire Navy, that U.S. Navy that kind of goes by South America. So like it was like an entire branch of the fucking army or the military that he was working with and shit. So like, anyways, he's at a convention, he's working this booth, and this is around the time where he's like, for at least the last year, on and off, feeling really bad, feeling okay, having weird pains on his shoulder, on his back, goes to the ER. This is a year long, and he's doing things like acupuncture. They're telling him, oh, you broke a rib or whatever. They can't tell him why he keeps having these things. So eventually, he's at this fucking conference, and while I'm calling my dad while watching The Secret, he's like, I don't feel good. I remember him telling me this. Yeah. So then the following week, he goes to the ER again because he feels so not good that he has to go to the ER. And this is like right after the last time he went to the doctor, they told him he had a broken rib. Why would he have a broken rib? So they're like, fuck it, let's just do a whole CAT scan. And they're like, oh shit, so your results from the scan came back. You not only have cancer, it's stage 4 cancer. It started in your liver and already started in your bladder and already spread to your liver. So I'm like, oh, we're good. Law of attraction, The Secret. So I'm trying to stay positive the whole time, and I'm trying to keep them positive the whole time, but it ends up not turning out great. You know, it was actually really bad. Yeah. I mean, 6 months later, he was gone. So that after that, I kind of just turned a blind eye towards The Secret.
Well, probably worse than a blind eye. It's probably like a pain point for you.
Yeah.
Because it's like, did he manifest cancer? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what necessarily caused it. It could have been any number of things. Yeah. 1, he was 65. 2, he went to the Vietnam War as a helicopter pilot several times, and they would use this thing called Agent Orange to kill the trees so you could see
chemicals, right?
Yeah, and it caused hella cancer with all the Vietnam vets. Yeah. So it could have been that. He was also an alcoholic up until his 50s. He was also a smoker into his 50s. So any number of things. Yeah,
man. Well, sorry about your dad and stuff. And I think that's a perfect thing to bring up, though, because it's there's a lot of people who have stigmas around the law of attraction and The Secret, because it's I think Dave Chappelle has a joke. He's like, that's a bunch of bullshit. You don't think there's a starving kid in Africa trying to manifest a sandwich, like, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. And like a lot of people say like, oh, well, the secret works if it's working for you. Like, of course you believe in it and you need a way to justify the good things in your life. Like, because it's natural. Like we don't want to take all the credit. We're humble if you're a sane person, right? So you give it to the universe. You're like, thank you for this. I'm grateful. But if it doesn't work, like, what's that? What's that bullshit? So I think that you do believe in the law of attraction, man. The Secret, I think, did a huge disservice to that community and to that powerful concept of the law of attraction.
Yeah.
Massive disservice, because it only talked about your thoughts are things, what you think about, you bring about, and it's pretty much Amazon Prime with the universe. 2 days, it'll be delivered on your door.
Yeah.
And, it's bullshit if it doesn't work. And it's like, why would you put that in people's head?
Yeah.
There's the law of attraction, LOA. That's what it's abbreviated as. Then there's a huge component, which is the law of Goya, Goya. Stands for get off your ass. You can't just manifest things to you like that, like Amazon Prime overnight, and it just shows up. You actually have to do work.
Yeah.
You got to be consistent with it. You got to, like, everything stems from a belief. So call it law of attraction, call it positive thinking, call it self-development, call it shit on a stick. I don't care. Like, it's all the same thing. And when you were talking about earlier, there's a particle here and it moves this over here. Remember that? And like mirrors each other. Like, if you believe that, you believe in manifesting in the law of attraction. So I think it's less if you believe it or not. You do believe it because of that. And the second thing is the stigma around it for you and why it might be kind of like, this thing's bullshit is probably the story with your dad and whatnot.
Probably.
That stems from that movie, The Secret, which I think is actually a disservice to the whole community.
Interesting. So like when I hear things like get off your ass, I guess in just the way I perceive it and the way I've categorized it in my head, as soon as we get into talking about taking action, that's where I'm like, oh, we're not actually in the law of attraction realm anymore. Now we're in the personal development realm. Because I guess the way I perceive it, the way I would define it in my head, if I created my own urban dictionary for it, is like law of attraction is trying to manifest with your thoughts without doing action. The second you start talking about taking action, now you're someone who's just obsessed working towards a goal.
So that's a good point. Great point. And I thought the exact same thing. So it goes law of attraction, then law of Goya, right? And then you actually get the thing because you're in alignment with it. But then that's the key. You have to be in alignment with it, right? So here's LOA, here's law of Goya. There's another thing right up here that presupposes all of that, and it's vibration and energy and alignment and like being congruent with things. Because if you believe something but your actions aren't in alignment with that, it's not going to happen. That's running, is it east looking for a sunrise? I don't know which one, but that's what you're doing. You have to be in alignment with all of it. You have to like believe it and act in accordance with it, otherwise it won't happen. So I think where people go wrong with it is they only go after the action with self-development. This is the camp I was in last year where I was like, I'm going to act to be a millionaire. Like, I'm just going to do everything. I'm going to go to all the events. I'm going to take all the business courses. I'm going to spend 66 grand on it. I'm going to act, muscle my way to $1 million. And that works for some people because, they believe it. They have faith in it. I had faith in it, but like, I wasn't necessarily in alignment with it. But then there's the people in this camp, which is I'm just going to sit all day, do my 50 affirmations and visualize it and blah, 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 blah. But they're not taking the action. So that's incongruent right here. But when you have an alignment right here and it's all working together, that's really where it clicks open. So where I'm going with that is that if you're too extreme in one of the camps, again, the middle path, right? You're too extreme in one of the camps. That's not alignment. Like that's not going to work for you. And if you're running into issues, it's one of those two. Right? It's got to be both. Is that making sense?
Yeah. So it's like they're all necessary. You have to know where you want, know what you want, put out that energy, but also work your ass off towards it.
Exactly. And I think you'll work harder and get better results when you're in alignment with it and you believe it. Because if you don't believe it, if you have doubts in your head, well, guess what? That's like jumping out of a plane and being like, maybe my parachutes, did I pack my parachute right? Like I've done it 100 times, but maybe this was the time where it didn't. You get all in your head. If you go up to approach a girl and you're like, maybe this is the time she throws a drink in my face and tells me to fuck off. And like everything I've been fearing, like maybe this is really the time. How's your action going to be?
Yeah.
Even if subconsciously you're thinking like, she's going to throw a drink in my face. All women, they're bad. Like I had that, she's going to cheat on me again. Like your actions are going to be fucked up by that, man. So yeah, you need the law of attraction because that rewires your brain that, oh, it's possible. Oh, okay, I can do it. Thoughts are things. What I'm actually thinking is actually affecting how I'm acting.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I want to like shake people and be like, the secret, like, no, it's more than that.
I think there was a question I asked you the last time you were here about like, do you think you were born with a chip on your shoulder or like what caused it? Maybe it was you, maybe it was someone else. I know I talked about that with someone about like a chip on the shoulder and what caused it. And I think it's interesting because when we talk about like, you need to think that way and then that'll affect how you act. I maybe think I'm unique or maybe I'm not unique. You guys let me know, right? Because when I had those moments like the Sean Malto thing or any number of things, when my dad tells me, oh, I don't want to get you P90X because you're not going to do it every day. So I save it up and buy it and I do it every day for 3 years. Yeah. Or when I'm 250 in 8th grade and I lose a bunch of weight because I want to be a good basketball player, in one summer I'm 170. These little moments, whenever I felt like I was at a disadvantage, I just worked my ass off towards getting it. And so I felt inspired to work harder to get it. And I feel like a lot of people, I don't know if that's common. And I don't know what it is about my childhood that gave me that chip on the shoulder that made it to where when I saw resistance, I was like, fuck that, I'm going to overcome it. Are most people like that? Or I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should stop because of that thing, right? Because they don't have the perspective.
So, okay, what you just said of like, fuck that, I'm going to prove them wrong, right?
Yeah.
I've had some of that motivation, right, too, in my life, and I have a lot of that, actually. I think a lot of guys can relate to, I'm going to prove them wrong. That girl who dumped me, I'm going to prove her wrong.
It's a very basketball player mentality, too. It's like
it's,
you're taught, hey, if you're not working right now, your competition's out there practicing right now, so, like, are you going to just let them outwork you? And so I think that is probably where it started.
But here's the thing. There's a lot of pain in those words. I'm going to prove them wrong. That's not your higher self talking. That's some ego.
Yeah.
So my challenge, and I'm in this camp with everybody. I'm not saying I'm above you. I'm in this camp. We're all guys. What happens after you get the thing that proves them wrong? Does it ever go away? Does it ever end? Or are you going to go on to the next battle to fight and prove them wrong too? When are we going to stop fighting and be like, oh, let's actually enjoy the thing? And maybe that's not the best way to get it.
Yeah.
And that's the question, man. And that's what I'm realizing is like proving them wrong is living for someone else. They still have control and power over you. The very words prove them wrong has nothing to do with you. And a lot of the times they're not even around to be like, okay, you proved your dad wrong. You're 45. He's dead. Now you're a millionaire and successful. How are you ever going to make peace with that? It's never going to end. It's going to carry over to the next person. You're going to project that energy onto your wife or onto your best friend or it's just, I think that's a lower vibrational energy of proving people wrong. I think there's a higher vibrational energy, which we talked about, which is what excites me.
Yeah.
What makes me happy internally. And I know that sounds a little woo, but like I go back to the passion. I go back to the flow. I go back to the present. I go back to what excites you. And that is a much higher vibrational energy than proving someone wrong. Do you agree?
I have a lot of thoughts. I don't know if I disagree or agree. I think what I'm thinking is maybe a little bit of it was to prove them wrong, but I think for me it was more, and I realized this from another childhood experience actually. I feel like it was more just like I feel like I'm capable, therefore I should show that I am capable.
That's higher. That's higher. See, proving them wrong is here. It's like, oh, I'm gonna get back at you.
Right.
I'm capable of more. That's excitement energy. That's a higher vibrational one right there.
So that's the other thought I have is because you always, when people talk about energy and law of attraction, they talk about low vibration,
right?
High vibration.
Right.
I was talking to a guy who Ian Stanley.
Oh yeah.
At the mastermind, I was talking to him because he used to do these Lionheart retreats, and I was like, explain this to me because I've had people explain it to me, and to me it still sounds a little confusing.
Yeah.
I said that, but to
energetic,
me it was cheesy woo woo.
Right.
Did you hear about the Lionheart?
I did not.
Okay, so the Lionheart is all about like, from what I understand, it seems like a lot of NLP, but it's like you have an inner child who's very ego driven. You have an inner teenager who's very fearful, very like wants validation. You have an adult side, and it's like which one of those is acting through you right now, and that's kind of the whole methodology. And in my head, I think of that in the same way I think of when people talk about like low vibration, high vibration. In the same way, when I talked about the science, if I arbitrarily said electrons are positive and protons are negative, it doesn't change anything because that's just a label I put on it. So in my opinion, objectively speaking, devil's advocate here, what makes it low vibration? Can I measure that vibration and actually say it's on a lower than this one? Or is it that I am going to call this one the higher one because I believe through my frame of reference, that's the more morally, ethically correct way, right? Because in my opinion, I'm like, well, if this way gets me the result, is it inherently bad?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
There's a really good book called Power versus Force, and it goes into that, and it's perfectly
I'm gonna
summed
pick that up.
Yeah, it's really dense.
Okay.
I tried to get the audiobook, fell asleep 3 times, but really badass book. And there's 2 things from it I want to share on related to that. So the title, Power versus Force. Having power, you could get the same result if you force it, but that's pushing it, right? That's exhausting. You're going to be tired. You're going to be burnt out. It's going to be a struggle. But then there's power, which is more like pulling it or getting pushed yourself, right? So that's the first thing is like, okay, am I using power or force to get the thing? But the second thing that's more relevant with vibrations is it's by, I forget his name, Hawkins is his last one. And he has a chart that everyone can look up. It's called the Hawkins chart. And it's like this cone shaped chart. And it's a rainbow colored cone, which doesn't help the woo on this, but it's ranking emotions based on their vibrational frequencies. Now, I don't know the methodology behind that. That could be a whole podcast. You can read the book to go into it. He measured it somehow. He was able to quantify, I don't know if it was peer reviewed and really, had all these awards with it, but he was somehow able to quantify energy. And he finds that the lower emotions are like shame, fear, guilt, right? And those are like dark red, think like swamp, low, sinks you down. Even when
Infrared.
you say, infrared, baby. When you say shame, guilt, fear, like that does not sound good. And then you get up to eventually neutrality where you're kind of apathetic, or that's a little bit below there. And then you start getting in these higher consciousness states of like love, peace, belonging, acceptance, and it keeps going up. So things resonate better. And even if how he got to those, okay, let's rank these, you can argue with the methods all day long, but think in your life when you actually felt like you were most on purpose and most present. Was it when you were fearful, shameful, guilty? No, you felt shitty. Those emotions suck. We can all, subjectively agree to that. But when you feel love, peace, belonging, all that stuff, like you feel better.
Yeah.
So let's just accept that Hawkins chart is true. And so what you're saying is, okay, if I'm here and it gets me the same result, why even elevate? But what I'm saying and what that book says in the whole law of attraction space, I would really call it like manifesting or spirituality, whatever you want to call it, metaphysical space, would say is that, but the higher one's going to make you happier along the way and you get it better, faster, and with less effort when you elevate toward that.
Got it.
That's the best way I know to explain it.
No, that makes sense. So I guess that helps me explain to me like why it's considered higher vibration versus lower vibration. Because
they actually measure it. That's the thing.
Got it.
But I know the whole word that's the thing with the lingo, right? I think the camp and the lingo, a lot of people don't go really deep on it.
Yeah.
Like we would do with, we spent 1.5 hours talking about aliens and stuff. Like we go deep. And once you have the logical explanation to it, I think you're really able to accept it and use it. And that's kind of my mission now on the channel. With Refuse and Settle, we pivoted all over the place and we finally settled in this camp. I didn't think I'd be here.
Dude, I'm seeing there's some really serious growth that's coming back to your channel.
It's crazy. I mean, that's a whole tactical conversation. We could talk tactics.
That's inspiring to me too.
Energetically, it is.
I don't know if you noticed, but I didn't post for like a while, 6-7 months, and then I started posting again. Views are down, way down.
Yeah.
It's like 1/5 what it was before, and I feel like it seems like right now, without having some wide perspective, but right now in the weeds, it feels like, man, this is never going to end. I'm never going to get my channel back or whatever. Did the algorithm did they take me out of the algorithm? Did
people go to the algorithm. That's always coaching people like my channel's not growing. It's the algorithm. And again, like you want to look at this on what we're talking about and put this in perspective, like prove them wrong comes into play there, man. Like I was in that camp for like a year or two. I was trying to get back to these numbers I had in 2017 where I was getting like 12,000 subscribers, 11,000 subscribers a month, 1 month, 17,000, like millions of views, like all this stuff. And I was always comparing myself like, I got to get back. I got to go back and chase that video I did, recreate it, try and do it better. And I was so obsessive about it. Logging in every morning I would start. And if the numbers were up, it was a good day. Okay, we're getting back there. And if they were down, it was a shitty day. Like, why am I even? I don't even want
I
to
get
film
that
a
way with
video.
my bank account, bro.
Exactly. Exactly. So like once I started shifting all this stuff, it's been really inspiring to see the numbers correspond to it. And now we're back to where we were at 2017, you know, and it's in a totally different niche, totally different area. But I don't know. I think it has to do with like the mindset you put yourself in and like being okay with you're not your results. You're not identified with these markers. Like men especially have a need to quantify things. How much money do you make? How many girls have you slept with? How much can you bench press? And I think we're really bad at anything without a number. It's really hard for us, which is why more men aren't into spirituality and metaphysics and all that stuff. Because it's like, how do you prove? Like, give me the science, dude. I don't want to quantify something. But I think that's a double-edged sword because it's good for building a business and going after it and laser focused, right? And do this one thing until it's done and force our way there. But man, how much more powerful could you be if you weren't identified as much with the numbers, if you know that you're more than just these metrics we compare ourselves by, if it's more about the experience? Because like, okay, you got $1 million, go rob a bank. Do that. Oh, you slept with 100 women, go hire 100 hookers. Like, isn't the method you get that equally as important as the actual metric? But our logical brains can't wrap around that sometimes. You know, it's just some self-awareness I've had around it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, on that note, I feel like we've been going 2 hours. We should fucking just end it on that high note, bro.
We talked about everything from UFOs, conspiracies, Nazis to energetic vibrations in the quantum field. I feel like there's nothing left to talk about.
So for the crazies who are still listening to us, quick announcement before we get out of here. We're officially on every podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, you name it, all of them. We're on all of them. So if you don't like watching the video one, or sometimes you feel like you can't commit 2 hours watching a video, listen to us at the gym, listen to us in the car, go to Spotify, look us up, #RawAndRelentless. You will find us because my big face is on that icon doing this. So quick announcement, but yeah, man, it was a pleasure having you on.
Sick, dude.
And I definitely want to have you on a regular basis. If you look at some of these, like Joe Rogan, perfect example. He has his friends on all the time, especially during quarantine where it's hard to get guests to fly in. But
it's true. True that, man. Yeah,
so
anytime.
we'll have to have you back on. We've already talked for collectively like 4 hours on my channel, so I'm sure we could keep going for decades.
We can keep riffing, dude. Anytime.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you. See you guys.